Yeah, no, it's not loading. This is not.
Okay, here. I'm not going to.
I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. The first item of business is a motion to go into closed meeting. Be it resolved, the Board of Supervisors hereby enters into a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following: discussion or consideration or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplinary or resignations of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. 1, Adjustment and Appeals Board. 2, Western Virginia Emergency Medical Service Council. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
It's closed session.
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes.
We're in closed session. Is there a motion to come out of closed meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
No, I was not here, so the time that I was here, everything was great.
This is only to come out of closed
This is to go out of closed session. So
This is to come out.
You're still
I wasn't here, so I guess I abstained.
okay. 6 ayes and 1 abstain. Chair Tuck?
Yes.
Okay. 6 ayes, 1 abstain.
Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.23711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County hereby certifies to the best of each member's knowledge that only public business matters lawfully exempted from an open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. And this resolution, or this, is our board giving our word to you that we're not talking about things that we're not supposed to be talking about back in closed session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Abstained. I wasn't here.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 abstain.
At this time, I want to ask that we observe a moment of silence, and then I'm going to ask the county administrator to lead us in our pledge.
Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
The next item on our agenda is the Montgomery County Annual Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to, each year, as you know, for the last couple of years, the Public Information Office has put together an annual report video that highlights some of the activities and events for the past year. And this year, of course, we have a new PIO with Jennifer on board, and Jennifer and Durley and Josh have done a great job working with our department heads and our community to put together a wonderful video for the past year. And I'm not sure, Josh, are you queuing it up, or Jennifer, are you going to come queue it up? Any introduction you want to make?
Yeah, I just want to say really quick, thank you all for letting us pull this together for you and share this with you tonight. And I wanted to say that I had a very small hand in pulling this very difficult to pick and choose the highlights for this report. It really was, and to keep it at 10 minutes, that was really difficult. So, spoiler alert, it's about 10 minutes. And when I first joined this team about 8 months ago, I knew I was joining an innovative and talented team that was very dedicated. It was very clear from the beginning. But I really have been able to appreciate through this process just how innovative Montgomery County is and just all the great things that we are doing. And I'm so proud to be a part of such a great team. But I really want to say that the credit for this, for what you're about to see, goes to Josh Rosenfeld and Durley Aguilar. They had a huge hand in putting this together. And every year I know Josh spends countless hours keeping track of things and finding creative elements for this and making sure it all comes together. And I really believe their creativity and talent just knows no bounds. And so I'm so thankful to be a part of that. So with that said, I hope you enjoy our annual report.
Hi, I am Valerie Ramey, retired communications supervisor for Salem Police Department and volunteer for the Montgomery County Registrar's Office. I am Montgomery County.
Hi, I'm Lee Watson. I work at Virginia Tech Environmental Health and Safety, and I'm a volunteer paramedic at Longshot McCoy Fire Rescue. I am Montgomery County.
Hi, I'm Dina Flencham. I'm a retired IT professional, and I am also a volunteer for the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. I am Montgomery County.
Hi, I'm David Mitchell, and I'm an administrative associate with Virginia Tech's Outreach and International Affairs Office of Engagement. And I'm a volunteer with the Montgomery County Animal Care and Adoption Center. I am Montgomery County.
Hello, my name is Sydney Gay. I'm a physician assistant and a paramedic for the Blacksburg Volunteer Rescue Squad, and I am Montgomery County.
All of us together are Montgomery County. And together, here's what we have accomplished this year.
We are Montgomery County, Virginia.
The Board of Supervisors approved the fiscal year 2018 budget of $186.9 million with no increased taxes or fees this year. The budget included $1 million in new funding for school operations, which is a 2.1% increase in funding this year. $250,000 for the Access to Community College Education, or ACE program, through New River Community College, allowing county residents to attend NRCC for free with a high school GPA of 2.5, completion of NRCC placement tests, and 40 hours of community service each semester. In addition, $390,000 has been set aside for parks and recreation projects in the eastern Montgomery and Auburn areas. In October 2016, the county sold 14 acres of the old Blacksburg Middle School site to Fiddler's Green LLC for a total of $1.75 million. The money from this 14-acre sale directly benefits future school capital projects. Supervisor Mary Biggs, as the Virginia Association of Counties, or VACO Board President, partnered with tourism to host the VACO Board of Directors meeting. The visiting county board members experienced a variety of local attractions, including the Smart Road and Animal Care and Adoption Center. Montgomery County sold a building in the Blacksburg Industrial Park for $3.2 million to Whipple North LLC. Spectrum Brands Incorporated received funding from the Virginia Jobs Investment Program for retraining in new machinery after committing to invest $7.28 million in its Montgomery County operation. InMotion, located in the EDA's Technology Manufacturing Building, expanded by adding $3.5 million in equipment and 20 new jobs. And 3 tech companies based in Montgomery County invested $2.4 million and hired 100 additional positions. This year, the IT department participated in CopSync, a law enforcement real-time information sharing network which involved the schools and the sheriff's office. Montgomery County also won the Digital Counties Award for the 4th year in a row. Carrie and Edwin Cole were recognized for their 36 years of volunteer service in local elections. And we'd like to welcome Connie Vire, our new General Registrar and Director of Elections. The Sheriff's Office made 1,156 arrests and 70 arrests for DUI. The fire departments responded to 1,654 calls, and the rescue squads responded to 7,675 calls. Sheriff Hank Barton unveiled the AID automatic injury detection system that will greatly cut down on the time it takes to get aid to officers in the field. The county awarded a contract to Thompson & Litton for the design of a new Reiner Fire Department. Blacksburg Rescue was chosen as Agency of the Year at the Western Virginia Emergency Medical Services annual meeting. Donna Brown was also awarded 911 Dispatcher Supervisor of the Year by the Western Virginia Emergency Medical Services. Derek Rogers was honored as the Near Southwest Preparedness Alliance Volunteer of the Year. And Neil Turner received the Benny Summerlin Award for service to local government. In April, the Broomin' and Bloomin' Spring Cleanup took place for the 34th consecutive year. Volunteers collected 1,720 pounds of refuse over 41 miles in the county. Continuing a focus on sustainability, April also marked the launch of the Water Conservation Protection and Quality Education campaign. This continues our green initiatives throughout the county. And we would like to welcome Scott Woodrum, our new Director of Environmental Services. We continue collaboration with local and regional partners through a variety of projects and initiatives. We completed a study with the NRV Regional Commission on the Prices Fork Village and surrounding area. And Emily Gibson, Planning Director, made the top 100 government influencers list. 2 blood drives were hosted at the Government Center with Virginia Blood Services in April and July, exceeding collection goals both times. Our April drive exceeded participation goals by 29%, and our July drive did so by 16%. We facilitated the purchase of new AEDs to replace outdated units, saving the county over $20,000 in the process. And we'd like to welcome Clay McCoy as the new Director of Montgomery County Human Resources. The RSVP Advisory Council awarded 2 $1,000 scholarships to Natalie Cockrum from Radford High School and Raya Young from Christiansburg High School. And in May, RSVP hosted a recognition luncheon for their dedicated volunteers. In 2016, their 327 volunteers provided 61,520 hours of service to 71 different nonprofit organizations. We would also like to welcome Tanya Wynn as the new Human Services Director. The finance team received a Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. This is their 30th consecutive year of recognition from the Government Financial Officers Association. The National Institute of Governmental Purchasing recognized Montgomery County with the 04 Outstanding Agency Accreditation Achievement Award. Only 143 out of 2,900 governmental agencies in the United States and Canada have received this distinction. High academic achievement led to 19 Montgomery County public schools being fully accredited in the previous year. MCPS continues moving forward with construction projects, including the expansion of Falling Branch Elementary School. Division-wide graduation rates are over 94%, and more than 800 students earned industry certification while in high school, preparing them for careers after school. The library won the Virginia Public Library Directors Association Award for the Backpack Program in the Meadowbrook Library. The program sends food home with children every week over the summer. This past year, we served 100 children. This marks the second year of the library passport services. This past year, the library provided 833 passports to patrons. And we would like to welcome Kareem Khan, the new director of the Montgomery Floyd Regional Library. Dick's Sporting Goods made a large equipment donation to Montgomery County Parks and Recreation. Chevy Youth Baseball donated $500 and $4,000 in free programs to Montgomery County Youth Athletic Programs. Montgomery County's own Mid-County Park now has completely new playground equipment. Come by and check it out. And our very own Dixie AAA Baseball All-Star Team and Dixie Ponytail Softball All-Star Team are both advancing to state after winning the district. The Public Information Office received a Gold Summit Award for its Citizens Alert Sign Up Today video. Public Information also received an Apex Excellence and Silver Summit Award for the 2016 Annual Report. And the team welcomed a new Public Information Director, Jennifer Tatum Harris. Tourism expanded its presence into Blacksburg with a new location in the Community Arts Information Office on College Avenue. The Go to Town brand launch campaign kicked off, sponsored by Virginia Tourism Corporation and funded by a marketing leverage grant. Destination takeovers at 3 Virginia Welcome Centers in Bristol, Lambsburg, and Rocky Gap were used to increase information about Montgomery County as a tourist destination. Tourism received a grant to purchase a Go-to-Town branded 2017 Ford Escape to help with county promotion. And tourism co-hosted regional events including the Mountains of Music Homecoming in Montgomery County and Virginia's Outdoor Expo at Visit Park in Radford, Virginia. Since the center's grand opening on April 29th, more than 250 pets have been adopted, reclaimed, rescued, or fostered. We've had nearly 200 volunteers and have hosted several group tours to include local schools and daycares. And last but not least, we welcomed Eileen Mahan as the center's first executive director.
Thank you, Jennifer. As you can see from the video, it's been a year of great change. We've had a lot of accomplishments. We also couldn't have produced an annual video without recognizing the contributions of Steve Phillips too. So that was a challenge to figure out how to get Steve in the video, but we couldn't have done that without having Steve there. But a lot of challenges, a lot of great things that happened during the year. And again, Jennifer and your staff, thank you so much.
Well, the next item on our agenda is public hearings, and the subject A, the first public hearing that we have is relocation of the D1 precinct polling places, specifically an ordinance changing the location for the D1 precinct polling place from Christiansburg Armory, located at 15 College Street in the town of Christiansburg in the county of Montgomery, Virginia, to the Victory Restoration Church located at 190 Bishopsgate Road Northwest in the town of Christiansburg, county of Montgomery, Virginia. And I don't know if there's, I saw Ms. Meyer here earlier. I don't
She's
know.
behind the
Okay,
monitor.
there she's behind the monitor. I don't believe we have anyone signed up. Just because you didn't sign up, is there anyone who would like to address the board in regards to this public hearing? Seeing no one coming forward, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. The second is AFD number 6. Specifically, this public hearing is in regards to District number 6, south of Charlottesville. Is generally located in the southeastern portion of Montgomery County, and it is in the vicinity of Allegheny Spring Road, Route 637, and Boners Run Road, Route 634. Emily?
Thank you. We have a brief presentation to go over the AFD 6 renewal. AFD 6 was originally formed in 1981 and renewed in its normal schedule back in 2009. And when we started working on AFD 6 and as it exists today, it's 1,350 acres and it's made up of 7 owners. As part of the process, this is a good vicinity map. So you can see here, this is 460, so it's to the south, and it's bisected by Allegheny Spring right there. So as I mentioned, we started out with 7 owners and the 1,350 acres. And we had one owner withdraw, and that was 500 acres and made up the core of the district. When we first met with our AFD advisory committee, we actually had very low attendance and decided to hold another meeting because we had some issues with the U.S. Postal Service. During that time, we sought out additional owners, And you'll see here the colors represent green is originally part of District 6. This yellow in the middle represents the 503 acres that were withdrawn. But thankfully, this peach color here shows 816 new acres added to the district, which creates this core now to the right side. And this table represents all of the new property owners with the new acreage that you see here is 1,662. So our AFD Advisory Committee did meet to go over what we just showed you, the addition of the new property even with the 500 acres being withdrawn. And they recommended approval of this renewal with those additional acres to you for the standard period of 8 years. We had our Planning Commission public hearing last week with the Planning Commission. We had 2 members absent, but everyone else was in support of this AFD 6 renewal. Just as a heads up, certainly you have the ability to modify this, but we did not see any reasons to recommend anything other than a renewal with the additional acreage. And just so you'll know, as we enter into the public hearing, you have until December the 31st to actually make a determination.
Does anyone have any questions for Emily?
Why would somebody withdraw from the AFD?
In this particular case, the property owner said that they were interested in basically doing something that's not allowed in the AFD, which is supposed to center mostly, if not totally, around ag and forestal uses. We do allow some residential development within there, but this particular owner was looking at maybe some other options for his property.
Thank you.
Any other questions of board members before I open it up to the general public? Thank you, Emily. And I guess I am on the AFD board. I was there for the first hearing. I was unable to attend the second hearing, but they were able to get a quorum. And there was a general consensus, and I want to thank our staff for reaching out to that landowner. As you can imagine, there were some serious questions whether the viability of that AFD district, and our staff did a great job of reaching out and getting that land into the AFD. Is there anyone, there's no one signed up in regards to the AFD, but you don't have to be signed up. Is there anyone who would like to address the board on this public hearing? Seeing no one coming forward, I'll go ahead and close that public hearing. And our next is a special use permit, the New River Valley Regional Water Authority. Specifically, this public hearing is a request by the New River Valley Regional Water Authority for a special use permit for a total of 24.625 acres to expand the existing water treatment plant to include the construction of additional buildings and underground water storage tanks. And I know that the applicant is here, and Emily, if you wouldn't mind coming forward.
We're going to walk you through a few slides that represent this application. And just before we get started, just to be clear, you can see on the vicinity map, this is actually where the authority is currently located. They've been located there since before zoning, and therefore they've just been existing non-conforming. Since they're looking at doing an expansion, we wanted to make them conforming by going through the SUP process. You'll remember this is similar to what we did last year with an AEP project. Whenever we have public utilities, they typically, based on our current zoning, need an SUP. Just to give you a little background, like I mentioned, it is the existing plan. There's 6 different parcels. The applicant has indicated that they wish to combine them all into one parcel concurrently with this process, and it is existing non-conforming. We're going to show just a vicinity map. You can see the intersection of Price's Fork, Pepper's Ferry, and Walton here, and these dark lines represent all of the properties owned by the authority. And this is also the zoning, so you can see there A1, and you've got some general business and multifamily in the area. This is what was included in the application from the applicant. Shows a phased approach to these expansions. The first is here in yellow. That's new administrative buildings as well as a new entrance on Walton. Second phase would be the ability to take down the existing administrative building and proceed with some tanks and storage needs. There was a plat that was included with the packet of information you got, and that does show that they plan to vacate those interior property lines. They also provided elevations that were included in your packet. And this is just a general aerial provided by staff that shows more or less the way the authority looks by air today. We took a look at the comprehensive plan. You can see here that when the Bellevue Village plan was last updated, those parcels were all identified as civic. This application does qualify for SUP, and we do find it to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. As I mentioned, when the most recent update of Bellevue Village took place, it was identified as civic. The expansion is of the existing plant on their properties. It shows the 6 different parcels, as I mentioned, being combined into one. And part of the phased construction is that with the new shop building, there will be a new access on Walton, and the applicant can speak to it a little bit, but it creates a little bit of better access for coming in Pepper's Ferry and leaving Walton, so you can use the light, especially for left turns. It also closes some of the smaller entrances associated with the existing home property, and that VDOT is appreciative of that, consolidating the entrances. Staff provided the analysis to the Planning Commission, recommending approval with a single condition, and that would be general conformance with the plan that we provided to you. That basically shows approximately what they'd like to do and where. It includes their phasing. At our Planning Commission public hearing last week, we had 2 members absent, 1 abstention, but the Planning Commission overwhelmingly did support the application. I will let you know that prior to the public hearing, we had 2 calls, 1 general inquiry and 1 expressing some questions and concerns. And we had 4 members of the public speak at the public hearing, mostly with questions, but some did voice some concerns. In following up with the applicant, they've had some opportunity to reach out and talk to all of these people who are adjacent property owners that really had more questions, and then some minor concerns related to what the new fencing would look like, things like that. That's all I have from staff. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
I'm going to just ask generally, does anyone have any questions?
Just one. Is there, not that it matters, but was there any discussion or anything said about doing any upgrades to Walton Road because of that?
Upgrades to Walton Road?
Yeah.
No, sir. Just the actual entrance itself.
Any other questions? I know the applicant is here. Does the applicant wish to speak? Okay, I was just checking if you wish to speak.
I'd like to ask him a question if I can.
With the applicant.
Sorry to get you out of chair just for this. What is, I guess, and I hope you have this in your head, and I apologize if you don't, what is the current capacity and use, and then what is the proposed capacity and use after expansion?
The plant itself?
Yeah.
It'll be the same permitted capacity that it currently is at 12.4 million gallons a day. The issue that we have is that it's aging infrastructure, so we have reliability issues. We also have safety issues for the staff that work there, because we have our high potential for our flash event at the plant. This is to bring it all into compliance and to get it up to industry standards. Also, the improvements are going to help us be able to operate more efficiently and effectively. So that's the main thing, is to get it back up to where it needs to be with industry standards, so that we can provide a long-term sustainable supply for this region.
Thank you.
Is there going to be bordered all the way around it, like a fence or something?
There will be a fence around it, yes, sir. There are, because of the chemicals that we have on site, we're required to maintain a secure facility. So we will be putting perimeter fencing around and replacing the old perimeter fencing and putting in new. I'm working on that with the engineers as we currently speak. We had a discussion about some of that today. That was one of the questions from one of the neighboring property owners. So we're putting some details of that together. The main thing is to protect from any terrorist activity or someone getting in and doing something that they shouldn't be.
I was just worried about kids getting in there.
Yes, sir. No, the plan is to put perimeter fencing and to be secure. We're going to have more cameras on the site that we currently have. It'll be monitored at all times.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I just have one question. I think that was made during the planning, and so I want to clarify it for my fellow supervisors. You had mentioned, are you planning on taking tractor trailers out Walton Road and deliveries of that size, or is that going to be on 114?
Sure. No, it's a great question, sir. The chemical deliveries will still come off of 114 in because the, yeah, if you don't mind, Emily, that'd be great. The location of where the chemical deliveries will be, yeah, that's perfect. It's generally, if you're looking at the map here, our plant, you see the basins in the building, they currently deliver the chemicals right there on the side next to where the trailer park is. And so there still will be chemical deliveries drop off right there. And then within the new building there on the back side of the parking lot right there with the big green box, other chemicals will be delivered right there. So the plan is to help facilitate truck traffic and to be able to get off-site because currently on-site they have to do a 3-point turn around the building. And to make it safer for them and for the traffic on 114, they'll come in off of 114, make their delivery, come down the new road, down on the wall, and be at the light to be able to make their turn out back on 114. It is my intention, because in talking with Emily at our meeting, my goal is to have a Walton Road address for the admin building in the shop, so that on our website we can direct traffic to the entrance on Walton Road and have the general public come in that way so that only chemical deliveries come off of 114 to try to minimize that use.
All right. Does that spark any other additional questions? Ms. Perkins?
What about the underground water storage tanks? What do we have those now, or are we just adding to them?
No, ma'am, we do not have any underground storage tanks on the plant site right now. We are adding those to the site to add additional storage so that currently we have 3 tanks out in the system that provide storage to be able to supply the university and the 2 towns in the county. And that's a very limited supply. Mm-hmm. When we have to do major maintenance items at the plant, right now we have to juggle around when school's out at Virginia Tech, nighttime when demand's low, and we don't have a lot of flexibility or a big window to be able to do some of the bigger maintenance items that need to be done to the plant on a regular basis. This storage is going to enable us to be able to do those larger, bigger maintenance items on a regular basis to be able to keep up with our facility like we need to.
How many are you planning?
It's 2 1 million gallon tanks, so we'll have 2 million gallons of storage to be able to deliver out to the system at any time.
Thank you.
Does that spark any additional questions?
I just want to make a comment. After taking, I don't know how many classes there on field trips, this is sorely needed. That facility has really used its limit of life up. And it's been maintained the best way possible, but this is sorely needed, so.
The staff there has done an amazing job at keeping the facility in the condition that it's in, given the age that it's in. And it's attributed to them.
I have one more question. Is this something that you need us to move and act on quickly?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a board meeting. We have a water authority board meeting Wednesday, so I'm sure Caleb would love to tell us he got it approved Monday night, right?
Yeah, correct.
Can we move it on the agenda for tonight?
We can.
We can do it after the public hearing.
After the public hearing. If there's a motion and no opposition. I'm going to go ahead and thank you, Caleb. I appreciate you being here. I'm going to, at this point in time, open it up to the general public. Again, there's no one signed up. If there's anyone who would like to address the board on this issue, you'd have 5 minutes. I'm seeing no one coming forward, so I'll go ahead and close this public hearing. And the fourth is a rezoning application by Riley and Rebecca Thornrock. A request by Riley and Rebecca Thornrock and their agent Mid-Atlantic Architects Group, PLLC, to rezone a total of 0.663 acres from RM-1 multifamily residential with proffered conditions of allowing 3 dwelling units to RM-1 multifamily residential with the possibility of proffered conditions to allow 6 dwelling units. Emily, you're up again.
Well, this is a short one. We did hold our hearing on the 18th with the Planning Commission, and they've requested some additional information from the applicant. So I know tonight's hearing has been advertised, and certainly I talked to Marty. If anyone signed up or if anyone would like to speak, we could take that this evening. However, we'd like to continue the hearing to your meeting on the 15th if possible, to give the Planning Commission time to make their recommendation for you.
Good. So we'll need to open it, see if anyone wants to speak. No staff presentation because we don't know what the recommendation is. And then instead of closing the hearing, we need to continue it to the date of the 15th.
November 15th.
7:15.
Well, at this time, I'll go ahead and open it up to the general public. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board on this rezoning application? This public hearing. I'm seeing no one coming forward, so I'm not going to close it at this time, but is there a motion to continue this over to the November the 15th at 7:15 board meeting?
Motion.
Second. Any discussion?
You don't.
I don't need to call the roll? Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we need a vote. I think it'd be good.
We do need a vote.
You do need a vote? Okay.
Okay. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Now, next up item on our agenda is public address. This is our board's opportunity to listen to our citizens. Each citizen will be able to come forward and they'll have 5 minutes. All I ask is that you state your name and address. There is no one signed up, I don't believe, but that doesn't mean that you can't speak. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? Please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Linda Majors, 2620 Mount Tabor Road, Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm here to first of all say that I'm disappointed that Montgomery County did not take the opportunity to respond to technical questions for stormwater and erosion to the DEQ. Maybe we didn't, push enough or make it clear enough that that would be a good idea. You had, at the very last minute, you had what Roanoke County did, and I know that our county certainly could have made some comments like that also. This is certainly, MVP's application is certainly incredibly deficient. I'd also ask you to ask for a suspension, increase in time. That also didn't happen. So I'll be looking at different ways to interact in a more positive way with the board to get things done. I did send you the 2 comments that I made to DEQ. One was the difficulty in trying to get the DEQ to come on the ground to look at a Slusher's Chapel Conservation Area site. And the first letter I wrote was March 9th. And it continues on right now with the county trying to get them to come. And this is an important thing to know. The second letter I wrote was looking at the application that MVP made to DEQ for stormwater. And a really glaring problem was in the landslide table, they used the 2015 obsolete route as talking about there's a landslide potential above the substation. That's more than a mile away from what the 2016 route is, that is the approved route by FERC. So that means that every milepost they make from that point on to down to Elliston in our county is wrong, totally wrong. One example of inaccurate, bad data from MVP. This is a company that you have to check. You can't assume that whatever they give anybody, any agency, is correct. And this will go to you guys for flood insurance when that comes up. You will be in the hot seat checking that out, because we could lose our ability to get flood insurance for people if you make the wrong decision. Another example of problems that Roanoke County mentioned, and I also mentioned, was in the final FEIS. there were, for the Forest Service, on the north slope of Brush Mountain, every little bit of slope was analyzed. On the south slope, which is private property, which is also coming down from the same hilltop, there was no analysis of anything. And in fact, they said there was absolutely no landslide potential. Of course, everything is going to change when you cut trees down on slopes. It's going to increase the flooding everywhere. It will increase landslide and debris slides. It will increase everything. And all of this needs to be carefully looked at. We are now starting to turn our attention to the floodplain regulations because the county has to issue a permit for MVP to cross the floodplain, which it will be doing on, I know at least on the Roanoke River. We have a conference call on Monday with DCR, and we are going to be getting maps and stuff, so we will be in contact with probably each of you again, like I did before, so that we can have a really good discussion, understanding of what needs to be done so that we don't end up missing the boat for our county by not putting our voice in, no matter how much it seems not to matter. It's important to voice our opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other individuals who would like to address the board? Seeing no one else come forward, I'll go ahead and close the public address. I don't believe that there is an addendum, but I skipped over, apologize. I'll get back into this step there. Is there any motions regarding any of the public hearing matters? Let's start off with, is there one about the polling place and changing that? Is there anyone who wants to make a motion at this point in time?
Motion.
So any discussion about the relocation of the D1 polling place? And I guess there's a motion at this point in time to go ahead and move forward to move. We've had a public hearing. We've had no comments contrary that I recall anybody in opposition.
And I just, if I can, Mr. Chair, Marty, that doesn't take effect until January 1, 2018, correct?
Correct.
So it doesn't affect the elections in November.
Nope.
Just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
There's a motion, a second. Any further discussion?
No, not right now.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item from after our public hearing was the AFD, District Number 6. Is there any motions in regards to this?
Motion.
Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
And the last one was a special use permit in regards to the New River Valley Regional Water Authority.
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Now, is there a motion in regards to consent agenda?
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, I had one question, if I can find it on, I don't know if we'll have the answer to it, but let me see. On subject number 3, victim witness grant, we're returning $7,784 back to the state because it wasn't used, and I was anxious to know why it wasn't used. I don't like to return money to the state if we don't have to.
I don't have an answer to that.
Well, it just seems like that would be money that would be spent. I don't know. Is there any way to find that out?
So you're asking us to go ahead and pull that item out of it?
No, I mean, I'll vote on it, but I just would like to know why they didn't use it.
We can certainly check with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and see if they can give us more information.
That'd be great.
So you're not asking that to come off the consent?
No, I just want to know why we were returning money to the state.
Right.
Okay. There was a motion and a second, if I recall correctly. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Is there a motion to go into work session?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
And next item on our agenda is History of Constitutional Officers. Dr. Karen Holt is with us. She is a professor and chair of the Political Science and core faculty member in the Center for Public Administration and Policy at Virginia Tech. Before coming to Virginia Tech in August of 1990, she taught at Pomona College and Claremont Graduate School in Claremont, California. She's also worked as a staffer in the U.S. House of Representatives and as a policy analyst at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Born in Gary, Indiana, Dr. Holt grew up in Central Illinois and in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. She received her BA from Creighton University and attended graduate school at Harvard and the University of Minnesota. She currently teaches courses in state and local government public policy at Virginia Tech, and the U.S. presidency, organizational theory, science and social science methodologies. Her primary research interests are U.S. executive, state, and local governments, organizations, and theories in institutional design and on social science methodologies. Dr. Holt, thank you.
Thank you. See if I can get this to work.
And I was going to ask staff if they could dim the lights. Thank you.
I don't have the video expertise that you all have, so please bear with me. I'm delighted to be here. I find, since I moved to Virginia many years ago now, that the distinctiveness of the local government setup in Virginia is both impressive in many ways and striking compared to that in many other states, as most of you know. So I'll try to, as Mr. Tuck asked me, just give a brief historical overview of the local constitutional officers in Virginia, emphasizing the Commissioner of the Revenue and the Treasurer. And then certainly your questions will be the most exciting part of the discussion, I think. All of you are aware of the existing local state constitutional officers, which are listed on the screen. Perhaps of interest is when the two of subject tonight came into being. The first mention of the Commissioner of the Revenue was in the 1851 Constitution. The Treasurer was mentioned in the 1870 Constitution, the same Constitution that created boards of supervisors in local government as well. So that may be a telling change in Virginia history. Just to give a brief historical overview, which I hope then can spark some questions and asking for elaboration. We have these local elected constitutional officers in Virginia since the beginning of the Commonwealth itself. Many quote Thomas Jefferson as saying he was especially interested in having those who performed important local government services be responsible to those receiving those services. So as a result, these officials have been elected through much of the history of the Commonwealth. During the 19th century and the 3 state constitutions adopted during that time, there were 13 or more local government constitutional officers that were separately elected. I've given some examples of what some of those positions were, most of which no longer exist. Things like superintendent of schools, overseer of the poor, and surveyor. But many of these things really reflected the notions at the time of what were critical local government services in a still evolving state, in a state that in many cases was mostly rural, and people had to be quite concerned with the kinds of services that government might deliver and those perhaps that they did not want to deliver. That thought then was that electing these officials made a great deal of sense. As most of you know, who are better steeped in Virginia history perhaps than I am, certainly Mr. Tuck is that. Throughout the middle part of the 19th century, continuing toward the end of the century, there was some conflict and discussion at the local level about the role of county courts and county judges. You remember the county judges through some of the 19th century handled not only judicial responsibilities, but also handled legislative and administrative responsibilities too. That begins to change as we move into the middle part of the 19th century. In 1851, the Constitution for the first time mentions commissioners of the revenue. That's the first mention of those. They at that time were not necessarily elected officials, but they were mentioned as something that local governments could adopt. By 1870, we see that the county courts and county judges had mostly been removed from their legislative and administrative responsibilities. That, of course, is the time that panels like boards of supervisors was created, same period of time in which treasurers were added to the state constitution as well. So that becomes then perhaps an important turning point in this story. At this time then, there's attention at the state level of some of the pressing needs at the local level, and the notion that there should be perhaps a more explicit return to checks and balances and separation of powers at the local government level as well as at the state level. Probably more important for what we're talking about tonight, though, may be the 1902 state constitution. Now, if any of you have ever gone back online and read that state constitution, it is amazing the level of detail that the authors thought was necessary to include in the Constitution. Again, of interest to us here, as it says on the screen, for the first time, term limits were placed on these two elected officers. And so the treasurers under the 1902 Constitution could only be elected or serve for no more than 2 consecutive terms, nor could they serve as a deputy to one of their successors, at least immediately after they were in office. The notion there apparently was to make sure that these were independent officials and that there could be change in these kinds of positions that would be forced from the outside rather than depending on voters to make that change themselves. Also in 1902, there were term limits placed on the Commissioner of the Revenue. I've quoted the text here for a particular reason, so you can see exactly the way in which the state constitutions were thinking about these particular offices. For the Commissioner of the Revenue, there was no necessary expectation that people in these jobs would be elected. They also could be appointed. But the state constitution added, if they are elected, then there will be limits on the number of terms that they can serve in a particular time. Again, the effort seemed to be some concern about the fiscal responsibilities of people in these two positions, and perhaps the notion that they not develop into sinecures for particular elected officials, or at least some people would argue in looking back at constitutional history. Bringing us to the present, the current Constitution, adopted, of course, in 1971, provides for only 5 local constitutional officers. The 5 we have now, no term limits, all are elected. The one exception to that, of course, is that for the 2 officers that were, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I have one more screen. There we go. For the 2 officers that we're talking about, the Commissioner of the Revenue and the Treasurer, there continues to be some concern about them staying local elected officials. As most of you know, there are 6 counties in the state of Virginia, closest to us is Albemarle County, that have done away by referendum with these elected positions and put their responsibilities under directors of finance. And so we know that other counties like Fairfax and others around the state have moved in this direction. For the most part, those tend to be urban counties and counties with somewhat more population, somewhat higher populations, and perhaps more complicated fiscal systems. I want to draw together my comments by simply distilling some of the objectives that these various changes seem to have been serving over time. All of these, it would seem to me, are clearly important public values for you all to be thinking about that you do all of the time. The first one, of course, is Thomas Jefferson's accountability to the public, but also perhaps accountability to other elected officials. Both of these positions, I think, raise that issue throughout Virginia constitutional history. A second issue is that of appropriate expertise. Certainly, I think one can argue that as we moved into the 20th century in the state of Virginia, the positions of treasurer and Commonwealth of the Revenue became more important. We remember, of course, that a state income tax was first adopted for individuals in 1916, for businesses in 1915. That increased the amounts of responsibilities, especially on the Commissioner of the Revenue. They help people in filling out some of those forms, asking questions about what the state is requiring, and in addition, also do the initial collection of those revenues. So the argument with those people would be then that as the complications and the complexity of the jobs, then perhaps demands for particular expertise and competence became more involved in the discussions of these kinds of positions. Finally, These, of course, as you all know better than I, have involved several tensions among what these people in these jobs do and among the values that are being perceived here. Mr. Tuck mentioned especially the bird machine and these local elected officials. As you remember, Senator Byrd was first Governor Byrd, serving between 1925 and 1929. One of the things that Mr. Byrd was well known for was being, at the time, quite a modern Southern progressive. He was quite interested in modernizing government, both at the state level and at the local level. He also, of course, was interested in fiscal discipline and in pushing his concerns with pay-as-you-go revenue and spending of the revenue. Arguably then, the fact that he became very interested in these elected local government officials, the constitutional officers, which he was through his time as governor and then later as senator, one can argue in part was reflecting his seeing them as vehicles for helping him, especially as governor, fulfill some of his good government objectives. Later in Virginia history, we know these state constitutional officers and the other 3 elected state constitutional officers became critical parts of the so-called Byrd organization's courthouse cliques. They became then part of what we commonly call the Byrd machine. That has led to some people to be concerned with the possible politicization of these kinds of positions, and certainly these were key county actors that were involved in some of the massive resistance efforts throughout Virginia during the 1950s and in some other kinds of party politics during this period as well. So that's another one of the tensions that lies behind these sorts of positions. In addition, and perhaps as important, are simply the complications of, on the one hand, trying to have effectiveness and competence in these positions, and on the other hand, wanting some degree of accountability. Accountability to the citizens, accountability perhaps to other elected officials. Another tension that lies behind the creation of these kinds of positions, and they're being interrogated by you all perhaps as we go forward. A final issue that has come up, again, as all of you know, is the issue of the at-will employment of the staff that work for these constitutional officers. Interestingly, at least for those of us from outside Virginia, the folks that work in these constitutional offices are neither state staff nor are they local staff. They, in fact, work for the elected official who has them on their staff. On the one hand, an argument for that is that given that, then the elected official can have the kind of staff that performs in their jobs the way the elected official wants and that's consistent with those elected officials' goals. At the same time, there is some concern about perhaps some loss of competence in some of those staff positions, and also other kinds of concerns with equality and equity with other local government employees. I certainly was not asked to make policy recommendations, and I would not do so, but I do think it may be helpful to have a broader historical context in which to put these kinds of positions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Holt. I'll start with Supervisor Shepard. Do you have any questions for Dr. Holt?
Not right this minute.
And Supervisor DeMonts, do you have any questions?
You can call me Dr. DeMonts if you like.
Sorry.
That is an unearned doctorate. I hate to say that I am unfamiliar with the phrase courthouse cliques. What does that mean?
That was the notion that certainly when Mr. Byrd was both governor and senator, that a common way in which he asked for advice on statewide positions or on who to appoint, for example, as or who to support for state judgeships and for other kinds of positions was to consult quite closely with the county elected or the county elected officials and constitutional officers. They were called a clique because there was some sense in which what Mr. Byrd was operating was an old-style party machine. And what that meant then is that members of the clique or the machine were beholden to Mr. Byrd for keeping their office and for having the support of the Byrd political machine in terms of elections and patronage positions perhaps and other things. That's where the term began.
Thank you. That provided
Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
that put it all together in my brain. I appreciate it.
For some people who've studied politics in other settings, the term party machine may be an easier way to think about this. Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Supervisor Biggs?
Okay, you mentioned Fairfax and Albemarle as doing it. What are the other counties that have done this?
There are 6 counties. My notes are back there. Most of them are in Northern Virginia and in Tidewater. Albemarle is the closest one to us. And they, I think, changed to this, I want to say, in 2002. So relatively recently.
Okay, but you could get that for us?
Certainly,
Okay.
Be happy to.
And another question I have there been any counties that have done this and reverted back to having them be elected officials?
Not that I'm aware of, no. But again, I will check on that.
What about Roanoke?
Roanoke, no. No, still. I can check on that. Roanoke County, I don't believe so, but I will check.
Roanoke County still has the constitutional offices, but they're a charter.
They're a charter county, so that makes it somewhat different than say, Montgomery County, for example.
Okay, and does this lead to other changes in county government? Like if you go and do this, does it change anything else?
You know, that's a very good question. I think what it does change, I mean, certainly you're reducing the number of elected officials, the associated salaries linked to those elected officials. It also changes lines of command, certainly for the county administrator and also for the county board. So then, under a director of finance, the director of finance becomes an appointed position under state code. If the voters decide to eliminate these 2 positions as elected officials, then what state code says, the replacement is an appointed director of finance. So to that extent, if that changes some of the internal dynamics of the county, that would be that change, certainly.
So it doesn't change any other elected officials' positions?
It does not. It would only be the local county voters voting in a referendum if they went this far. And I think you're going to be talking about this later on with your lawyer and with other folks. But what you all would be deciding is whether or not this should be an issue placed for a county referendum. If the voters decided to vote to move these 2 offices from being elected to an appointed director of finance, that's the only change that would be made.
Okay, and I've been really confused, and maybe you can help me with this. The compensation board that gives money.
Yeah.
All right, first it was my understanding that you wouldn't get the money from them if you changed it, but then somebody else told me, yes, you still would. Do you know anything about that?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I've talked about this with somebody else that you may want to talk to as well, Stephanie Davis, who is director of not only our local government management certificate program at Virginia Tech, but she also is executive director of the public and nonprofit financial management program. She herself is a former member of the Board of Compensation, but also a former local county official in the finance area. At least right now, it appears as though the compensation limits would not necessarily be the same for folks that were working in a state finance department. Those then would come under the broader county kinds of operations. However, it would not be the case that if you went to a director of finance system, that the state income tax would still be collected, as it is right now through the treasurer's office. But that again is worth checking with legal counsel, I think.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I, by the way, neglected to mention, because I was attempting, probably unsuccessfully, to sticking to my time limit, is that this compensation board is an important part of the story as well. Formed in 1934, it has been tasked over time with giving a state level monitoring and oversight of what these officers and their staffs do. It's been a source for expertise dissemination, for answering questions, and following some JLARC recommendations in 1990 that the legislature decided not to adopt, has also put in place some certification requirements for staff in these 2 units as well. So there's some continuing concern with this issue of competence in the offices. But I'm sure you know all of that, so.
No, but thank you.
Supervisor King.
No.
Supervisor Perkins.
Yes, why, can you tell us why the cities that changed the system. Why they really did this. Now, you spoke of complications, large cities, it's very difficult to collect a lot of the things, but were there any specifics that caused this to happen?
I think probably, as with many things, it depends on local context. But in many of the cases, Fairfax County, for example, so these are counties, not cities, but Fairfax County, for example, was wrestling with some very complex financial decisions that needed to be made. Treasurers, of course, invest money as well as pursue what money is being collected. And on the Commissioner of the Revenue side, lots of complications in terms of doing assessments of various kinds. There was some concern among county board members and others about the qualifications of the people that were being elected to those positions and about the ability of citizens to be able to be appropriate judges of some of those complexities and complications. Moreover, I think there is some concern, as actually Senator Byrd had as well, with developing expertise and institutional memory. And if you have continual change in not only staff, but heads of offices, you may lose some of that. So it's a complex of those kinds of concerns.
So it was a politicizing of these offices.
It can be in part a politicization of the offices, but it also can be in part a concern about the balance between, on the one hand, direct accountability to the citizen, and on the other hand, the competence of the people in the job, or their expertise and preparation for the job.
So the Board of Supervisors that decided these changes would occur?
No, the voters of the counties. This has to go to voter referendum.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I heard you say
Yes.
it has to go to voter referendum.
It has to go to voters, yes.
Okay. So what happened with the officers being politicized, then it was based a great deal on the political parties that were involved in it. Is that correct?
In part, yes, but politicization can mean a variety of other things in addition to party politics. Certainly that's an undercurrent in some places. But I think another undercurrent can be something on the order of concern about voters' ability to recognize who's a good treasurer and who's a good commissioner of the revenue. So I think it's a complex variety of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time, people who are elected to these offices do not necessarily have any kind of background that would indicate that they were competent. Is that correct?
That is, in general, yes, correct. The compensation board becomes important because it has, through time, developed ways to credit and to set standards for people serving in both the constitutional officer positions and also in the staff positions. So that was kind of a middle road to address that concern about the qualifications of the people in the position.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so what happens then, as you were saying in Fairfax County, the people who were making the decision to go to referendum were not happy with what was going on with those individuals and those jobs. Is that right?
Presumably, yes. Yes.
And so, therefore, they were willing to submit it to the individuals. The people in the county, do they have any better sense of judgment as to what these things make?
Well, and I think, that's a great question, and I guess, and the answer could be, that's more difficult to understand, but someone in response might say they don't have any better judgment when they're voting for the Commissioner of the Revenue in the first place. So that really becomes the conundrum. The other part of this is that there is some concern among members of boards like yours about increasing local government fragmentation, so that you are held responsible, for example, for the performance across the county, and yet you don't have full control over some of the activities of these county offices. So that's, I think, is the other part of the story,
right,
too.
So it becomes something of the fact that you don't have any control over the performance of these. But that oftentimes goes back to a political situation.
It does, it does. It also goes back to checks and balances too.
Right.
So I mean, one can make several different arguments about this, but I think the specifics about why these counties decided to put this before voters really does vary. As I recall, in Fairfax, some of the concern is how monies were being invested. And then some of the concerns about how the monies were invested, where they were invested, and what the returns were.
Right.
So. Those are good questions, and that's why this is so difficult.
Right,
Yeah.
I may have some more questions.
Please.
But let's move on to some other people that might want to. I would prefer that you would just ask who has some additional questions rather than calling our names. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, that's the way I've been doing it for a couple
Well,
of
I
years.
just told you I prefer another way. Thank you.
Supervisor Creed, do you have any questions?
No, I'm fine.
Dr. Holt, we are in your debt. Thank you very much for coming and giving us an overview.
I have one more question.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, just
Yes.
a quick one. Would the ballot referendum have to be both offices, Commissioner of Revenue and Treasurer? Can you just do one?
I would think, though again, consult with legal counsel, I would think you could just do one.
Yeah, I'll do
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry for
I
interrupting.
I know what I don't know, and see to the expert. Thank you.
I was saying that, is there any other questions? How much we greatly appreciate you willing to provide your expertise
Happy
to our
to do so.
citizens, answering our questions to help us get a historical overview, and then we can move on to getting a legal overview,
Right.
and then we can have our staff in a couple of weeks provide us additional information, and then hopefully we'll have the Commissioners Association coming and address our board in about the third meeting away.
Of course, yes.
But again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
I
Yes.
do want to make a statement. I'm the elder citizen on this council of people, but I grew up in Eastern Virginia in the bird machine.
Okay.
With a father who was involved in politics, and there was the real reason in Eastern Virginia was just what you brought up. Mr. Byrd wanted to control the local government, and he very well did it. Nobody who wanted to be anything in local government would go against what Mr. Byrd said. So it was quite, I guess it transferred into that kind of setup with all the good reasons behind it that were there.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Next in is the legal procedures for alternate forms of government, and Marty, you're on.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Dr. Hall for everything
Marty,
she's-
can you, barely,
Yeah.
a little bit.
I think everything she
Okay,
said
right
was accurate, and I think she gives great context to what I'm about to speak about. But as you guys know, in Virginia, there's basically three ways that local government is carried out. You have cities, those are mainly more urban areas. You have towns, which are more urban areas within counties, and then you have counties, and counties originally started as very rural areas. And as a result of that, the government structure was different at the beginning and has since evolved, and I think Dr. Holt kind of talked about some of that. As you know, we're a deal state. Localities can only do what Richmond says you can do. And so the code lays out when we're talking about counties, what counties can do or what kind of government they can form. So under Virginia law, you have 7 different forms of county government. You have what's called the traditional form, which is what Montgomery County is and what most counties are. And that's the form that evolved over time to kind of govern the more rural areas of Virginia. There's a board of supervisors, like she mentioned in her slide, started in 1870. Board of supervisors were a policy determining board, and they also ran the government. They were, under a traditional form, you are not required to hire a county administrator. In fact, law evolved where eventually counties were given the authority, but not required to hire a county administrator. And that's because, it just became more complex where it became very difficult for a board of between 3 and 9 or 5 and 9, depending on the county, to actually run the day-to-day operations, not only do the necessary voting, but also run the day-to-day administration part. And so, then it became some changes. There's the county board form of government, which currently has 4 counties that do that. That's Scott, Carroll, Russell, and Grayson. If you know any of those, most of those are very rural. Carroll's got a little bit more than the other 3. Other than a setup on how the Board of Supervisors is done, you require having that large person. But the main change with county board is they made it a requirement that you hire a county administrator. And so that form evolved. And then starting in 1932, the General Assembly enacted what's called the Optional Forms Act. And what this did was it permitted counties to adopt alternate forms of government, in particular talking about the county executive form and the county manager form of government. That counties could do this, but they can only do it by referendum. And so and then what evolved after that is the more urban or almost city-like counties, like Fairfax County, which has over 1 million people. The urban county executive form of government formed, and only Fairfax County has that. And then the county manager plan evolved, and only Arlington has that. Under county manager form, which is in county executive form, those are the 2 forms that if this board was going to consider changing from a traditional board to a county executive or county manager form, those would be the 2 that you would consider, because the other ones are more for more urban counties than we currently are. Then the other type is county charter form of government, which is they still have their constitutional officers, however, they have charter powers, and those charter powers may be to where they actually do all the duties that the Commissioner of Revenue or Treasurer may do. However, those offices aren't eliminated. So they're in essence just kind of there. Meanwhile, the county's given certain powers under their charter, and the charters are issued by the General Assembly. And so Roanoke, Chesterfield, James City County are the 3 counties that have that. Under the current county executive form, there's 2 counties. There's, as she mentioned, Albemarle, which is the closest one, and then Prince William County of Northern Virginia is under that. And under county manager form, Henrico County is the only other one. So all other counties, including ourselves, then would come under traditional form. But let's concentrate on county executive and county manager form, because that's the 2 that you would consider, I think, if you were going to change from a traditional county board to a different form of government. The big thing with either a county executive or county manager is you're required to hire. If you're a county executive board of government, you're required to appoint a county executive. If you're a county manager form, you're required to appoint a county manager. Under county manager form, the county manager is generally seen as having stronger administrative statutory authority than the county executive. And a good example of that is under county executive form, the county executive recommends to the board who the department heads are, and the board actually appoints and hires the department heads. Where in a county manager form, the county manager appoints and hires the department heads, and the board has no say over those employees. Only has say over the county manager. But if you think about it, in the way things work now, this board delegates a lot of that authority to the county administrator. And I would think in most county executive positions, the board is delegating that authority to the county executive, because most boards aren't going to want to hire department heads. I mean, they're going to want to, have some say if things aren't done right. However, that's something that's generally going to be delegated. So the 2 forms of government aren't really that different in the way things operate. Dr. Holt mentioned the big change when you look at either going to a county executive or county manager form is that the two constitutional offices of treasurer and commissioner of revenue are abolished. You maintain the other three constitutional offices, which is the county attorney, not county attorney, the commonwealth attorney, the sheriff, and the clerk of the court. And what happens is that the Department of Finance then, under the statute, exercises all powers conferred and performs all duties that are imposed by general law upon commissioner of revenues and county treasurers. So what that means is when you're looking at the 15.2 of the state code, which deals with local government, deals with constitutional officers and the powers they have, when you see a power that a county commissioner of revenue has, that power would then go to the director of finance. And so in essence, you'd be almost putting the director of finance's name in there instead of the commissioner of revenue. And so what that means is that the department, you'd have to create a department of finance, which you already have anyway, but you would create one, and that person would administer the financial affairs, including budget, which our director of finance does now, custody of all public funds, which the treasurer now is in custody of. So the director would be, they supervise expenditures of the county, they disperse county funds, and then they exercise all powers conferred and perform all duties imposed by general law by commissioners and county treasurers. And what that means is they're going to assess all property taxes, they're going to collect all taxes, fees, and other revenue from the county. And so they will be in charge of all the financial affairs for the county. That person will be appointed either by the board or by the county executive or county manager. You would also, under county executive, county manager form, you'd have to have a Department of Social Services, which we already have. It's also required that you have a Department of Education, which then would be run by the elected school board and run by the superintendent. It'd be no different than what we have now. You're also required to have a Department of Health, and that would be run by the county health department. And also, you have the option of setting up a Department of Assessment, and that would be run by what's called a supervisor of assessment. And they would then exercise the powers of assessing that would ordinarily be conferred upon the director of finance. So you have that option if you wanted to set up a separate office for assessment. And one of the bonuses for that, if you wanted to do that, is the code specifically says that if a board sets up a Department of Assessment, then the board can then provide for annual assessment and equalization of assessments of real estate. As you know, we currently do 4-year term of reassessment. If you set up a Department of Assessment, you could then
Do it every year.
go to an annual assessment.
Every year,
That'd be
yeah.
the board's call. But like I said, you still have those other three constitutional offices. So how do you get there if you want to get there? Well, it's all statutory procedures are laid out in the code. And what it says is any county may adopt an optional form of government that's listed. And what they listed is 7 I mentioned, in accordance with referendum provisions of section 15.2301. So you have to hold a referendum. A referendum can be initiated by 2 ways. One, it can be a petition filed by the general electorate with I think 20% of the voters that last voted can then file a petition, sign the petition, file it with the circuit court, and ask the court, hey, we'd like to see a referendum for the county to consider an optional form of government, or a resolution passed by the Board of Supervisors, and that resolution would then be filed with the circuit court asking for a referendum. I think this was asked previously. What the petition or what the referendum will say was it can only ask, but the question can only be one form of government. So the question would be, should the county change to a county manager form of government, or should the county change to a county executive form of government? That would be the question. It can only be one of those. The question isn't, do we remove the 2 constitutional offices? That would just be the end result if the referendum's approved. Does that make sense? So you're actually changing the county government. You're not eliminating those 2 positions. That would just be the end result. Okay, if the board or petition is filed initiating the referendum cannot be held within 81 days of that order being issued by the circuit court setting the date. But the referendum would most likely be held on the date of general election. It would be recommended probably that it be held there. When you hold a referendum, the board and the county staff have to be neutral in that referendum. You cannot advocate for the change. You can only provide information without advocating. I know it sounds very gray, and it is.
Yes, it is.
However, I mean, private parties can advocate one way or the other, and they will, but board supervisors and county staff cannot. They are not allowed in any referendum, not just this referendum, but any referendum. Okay, if the referendum's approved, then it gets interesting. Then what happens is state law says, once the referendum is approved, the new form of government will not take place until such time that the entire governing body then goes up for re-election. So what that says is, let's say the board adopts a resolution in February or March, sets a referendum in November of next year. The referendum passes. Then what the state law says is the following November, the following next general election, the entire board's got to go up for re-election. And then it's at that point, January 1, after that election, the new form of government would be in place and the board would be set, and whoever wins those 7 spots. And then at that point, the 2 constitutional offices would be abolished as of January 1st of that date. Any
All right.
questions?
I'm going to start off with Supervisor Creed. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, a couple of things. Has to do with, why the heck do we want to get into something like that anyhow?
I don't know. I was just asked to tell you how to do it. I don't know.
And, you know, you said a referendum by people who may or may not have some knowledge of doing the job. And if you want a whole lot of problems with what's going on, go back a couple of years and you'll find that you could walk downstairs and there'd be a whole lot of things talked about, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. There used to be a lot of rigmarole going with it. And I just don't see anything right now that somebody will say, well, we're going to do this, but we don't know how in the HLL we're going to make it work. And I don't think you can make it work without having the people that are capable of doing it. And by the time it all works through, you're paying more money for that person who has that knowledge than you ever would somebody that's going for a year or 2 years and somebody else moves them out. I mean, that's just ridiculous in my books.
Did you have
more
any
of a statement than
Do you have any questions? That okay, Supervisor
I have
Perkins.
some, but
Supervisor Perkins.
it's crazy.
Okay, since you don't take my advice, did Dr. Holt say that, I guess I was writing too fast, talking about the Board of Compensation. And then underneath that, I have something about the collection of income taxes that no longer would that be done by the Commission of Revenue. So what we're saying is if you change these, it more than likely you got to change your form of government, or it might be worth your while. You don't have to.
No,
but you
are.
can. You are changing it. Well, I mean, you are changing it if you put them aside, right?
No, what you're doing is you're changing your form of government, which the result would be those 2 offices being abolished.
Okay.
And the duties being absorbed by the Director of Finance.
I understand.
Taken over by the Director of Finance.
But what I'm thinking is then that would be taken over by the Director of Finance.
Right.
That puts a great deal of understanding and whatever. I mean, whoever you give, whether you give the county executive or the county manager, which I think you said the county manager was probably maybe what we might go to. I don't know.
Probably county executive.
I mean, or either one of those two is what we would go to, okay? All right. What happens then? What I'm saying is it puts a great deal on the shoulders of the director of finance, right? And a great deal on the county executive form of government. So you'd have to be really, really careful about the person chosen to be director of finance, right?
Right, well, yeah, I mean, the director of finance would be run, but there'd be people underneath that person, you know, doing those duties as well. Obviously, one person can't do all those duties.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And one person can't do it all.
This really is you know, answers directly to the county executive, and so the county executive would be the one who's ultimately responsible for how all that's done.
Well, today, the county administrator appoints our financial director.
Correct.
Not in the same sense of this financial director, but in the sense that we have a director of budget and we have a financial director. So that person answers to the administrator, right? Not to us, but they come and explain what's going on. It concerns me that a lot of board members would get totally involved. Not that we don't get involved in it, but I'm saying we ask questions and we try to understand the budget that comes to us. But it seems like to me that board members might want to get very much involved, more involved, with the way the money is expended, and even much more than we do. And also the county administrator, even if he had people underneath him that did everything. It seems to me that we're talking about such a responsibility between those two individuals that it would be very difficult for board members to say, okay, we don't want that done. And if they get into a political situation, just get rid of the finance director and the county manager, right? Or executive right then and there. I mean, it seems, am I just carrying it too far? In other words, the board now really does approve the budget. There'd be nothing that would really, in the county executive form of government, no different than what we do now.
No.
Except that we could perhaps get even more involved, or would we not?
Well, I mean, I think you could turn your county executive and say, you know, maybe, you know, tell me what's going on with tax
Joe Smith,
collecting,
yeah.
tell me what's going on with assessing, and he or she would know because he's in charge of that through his director of finance.
Right.
So yeah, you can have a more direct line with your employee to those functions.
That's what I'm
But all the other
thinking.
stuff would still be the same.
Right.
The board dictates policy.
Sure.
And that doesn't change.
That's exactly true. Although a lot of the things we do are not policy, they're just involvement in what's happening to come up with the final result of what you're doing, how much you're expending, what you're spending for. So I don't know that it would be much difference, but I think I'd be worried about the finance director, and I'd be much more worried about the county administrator. Not only from the standpoint that they would have much more to do, but also for that direct line that anybody could go to and say, okay, change it. And it could be done. I'm talking about influence, I guess, on the individuals. That bothers me. But there are a lot of other things that bother me too, but anyway, go ahead. I've taken too much time. I'm glad I'm not going to be there anymore.
Supervisor King, if you have any legal questions, again, Marty's here to answer
I know.
the legal questions.
Well,
Supervisor
that's a
Benz.
legal question. Excuse me.
No, I was,
Okay, you mentioned that you had to have your own Department of Social Services. Did you say you had to have your own Department of Health?
You have a county department of health. Yeah, that would be run by the state health director like we have set up right now. It's the same we have, but you're just required to have that.
But isn't ours a health district now?
Well, it's the same thing.
All right, what about?
The health district would operate as a county department.
All right, what about the community services, the same?
It's, well, that's, it. Yeah, under social services, it'd be the same, yeah. You would have, the board could change, you could go to its, its own. You could stay with a policy board like we currently have, or you could go to a advisory board.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's no different than what you got now, and it'd be run by the director of social services that's currently.
Yeah, I just know in Chesterfield County, they have their own community services board, their own county community services board.
Right.
And we don't.
But yes, that's different than social services.
Yeah, that's why I was specifically asking about community services.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay. Now, let's pretend this all happens and you've got every one of the board members running for re-election. Does that mean that every 4 years, all board members keep running for re-election?
That would, yes.
Okay, I have a real problem with that because in areas that's happened before, there is no history at times when you re-elect a whole new board. And I think I personally favor staggered terms. I'll just put that out there. Okay, now, does it change the way board members would run by district or at large or electing a, does the board still elect their chair and vice chair, or how does that work? Because I know in Fairfax you elect your chair, the citizens elect the chair, but that's because it's an urban.
Right. Now, what the code says is you can only do one question at a time on the referendum. And so, let's say the board turns into a county executive form of government. And so once you do that, then the board could do, if they so choose, to hold an additional referendum at a later date and have the chair, elected chair, but not appointed. But until such time, the board would not be any different. It would still be by the same districts we have now. But under county manager, under county executive, you do have the authority if you wanted to do a elected chair, you could do that, but you can't do that in an initial referendum. Does that make sense? You can only do it after you're actually back.
And then the other thing that, has been stated by different individuals as well, this will make it so folks won't have to worry about keeping their job. Well, it might in 2 offices, but it will still not in the sheriff's department or in the clerk of court or in the Commonwealth attorney, because they still will be constitutional officers that can hire and fire at will, correct?
Correct, yeah. The other ones would become county employees.
Yeah. So we're just singling out 2. Okay, if we do this. Got it.
Well, we're not singling out,
Well, we are.
2 would be abolished if you did this, correct?
May I ask a question to follow up what Mary was saying?
well, hold on
please?
1 second. We're going to let everybody go around and then we'll follow up on the
All I want to do is ask one question of what Mary said.
And I've been.
I understand where you're coming from.
So we're trying to go and allow everybody an opportunity to speak, and you will be able to ask whatever question you would like as soon as every board member has had an opportunity, and you will be able to ask.
I don't need to be
before I-
lectured to. Just go and do what you want to do, please.
Supervisor DeMotts, do you have any questions of the county attorney?
Yes. So we would create a Department of Assessment, possibly, under...
You wouldn't have to do that, but that's an
But you
option.
could.
Correct.
So the job title of the overseer of that department is Supervisor of Assessment.
Correct.
Which kind of sounds like Commissioner of the Revenue, but removes, I guess, the will of the citizens in electing that person from the process. So that Supervisor of Assessment would be appointed by the Department of Finance? Or would that be a whole separate department?
It wouldn't be appointed by the Director of Finance, it'd be appointed by the county executive.
Yeah.
But would it fall under the overhead of the Department of Finance? Would this,
No,
the Department of...
it would take one of the functions away from the Director of Finance, that being the assessing.
And so that's how we would still ensure some level of accountability and unbiased assessments and collections for citizens.
I don't know if that's the reason. I think the reason that they do Department of Assessments is if you're going to assess on an annual basis, you're going to need professional assessors hired, and so you would have them under that type of thing. It's common, and I know most cities, big cities, have Department of Assessments. It's just if you're going to do it on an annual basis, then you're going to need. So what you do, then you don't have to hire somebody every 4 years to do it, but you do hire, assessors that work for the supervisor assessment, and he would then come under the county executive.
Okay. And then to the election of this board, so we would all be running for election or re-election at the same time. Staggered terms could not be re-implemented.
No,
so you have the possibility of 7 grandstanding politicians running for election all at the same time. I think that sounds, just my opinion, that sounds extraordinarily messy. And I guess a final just point to make, and this is just gathering from both of our speakers on this subject, I don't personally question the competence of our constitutional officers or of the electorate that would be asked to vote in a ballot referendum on this. I know that there's still a financial piece of information that needs to come before this board before I can say, I have a fully informed opinion on this subject. But I can say I'm a little bit uncomfortable right now with the path that we're going down and considering it, or I guess I'm not uncomfortable. I'm glad to have the information. I'm leaning towards being more uncomfortable with considering it because I think it reduces transparency to the electorate. And I think that's a very important component of government, and that's a very important component of my role in this position here. So I guess that's really all that I have to say.
Thank you. Supervisor Shepherd.
I just want a clarification. So if you go with the executive or manager, that position does away with the administrator.
The administrator becomes the executive.
Right.
In Albemarle County, they have a county executive. They don't have a county administrator.
Right. Yeah, I just want to clarify that.
I have a couple of questions. That if, let's say that we did pass in February, the board passed a resolution, the electorate would then be able to vote, and the constitutional officers aren't up for 2 more years, correct? Basically,
I'm not sure.
I believe it's 2 elections, and both have indicated that they're not intending to run. So let's say we passed it in February. The voters would then be able to vote up or down, and then if they voted it down, individuals would then be able to run and have that full year to be able to run. Am I thinking correctly as far as the logistics of the elections?
Yeah, I mean, your earliest referendum really would be November of 18.
18.
Yeah.
And if those offices are up in 19, so they would be able to know. If I'm an accountant and I want to run for treasurer, I'll be able to announce, I'll be able to run and make that decision if the citizens voted against it.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And then obviously if they voted for it,
then they would be abolished in 1 year.
They would be abolished in a year, and then we would all 7, where right now only 4 of the positions will be up in 2 years.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are the legal questions I had. Supervisor Perkins, you had some additional questions.
Yeah, when Ms. Biggs was giving her presentation, do we have to have 7 members of this board? I mean, as we change to the county executive, can we have 5? Can we have 3? Can we have 7? Can we have 9? Do you know?
Yeah, you can have, I think it's between 5 and 9.
Okay, so you can have 5, 7, or 9.
But isn't that part of the, that's part of the referendum, isn't it? If you,
No, the referendum question is, do you want to become that government?
Right.
But that's a whole other change because, we vote by districts and, we have to redo everything. That'd be a huge change.
And that's the next question. If we were to go to electing the chair of the board, would that person be elected at large?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I understood.
You cannot do that
Now.
now. Yeah,
No.
you have to first be that
Change your
government.
government and everything else. But we were talking about that, and that's why I wanted to know the numbers, and then I want to know, does that person have to be elected by district again? All right, then, let's say I was the board chair, and A would be, is my district. But if I wanted to run for chair, okay, let's say, would then my district be wide open if we still had 7?
I'm not sure.
Or would they be, or would I have to still be represented? Would the person who's the chair be a representative of that district?
Yeah, I understand your question. I'm just not sure of the answer because I didn't look too closely at that because that's not an option in this process. You'd have to become the county executive form of government first, and then that would be something that would be available to you if the board at that point wanted to pursue that, and it would take a referendum. But
Yeah.
that is a good question.
It would take another, yeah, well, I'm not sure either, but maybe Dr. Holt would
She may know.
care to answer that question, or she may know, but
Right.
I know, I just, as Mary was talking about what she was talking about, that question, those two questions came to my mind because we had talked about what happens when it changes your whole form of government. What are you going to do in that situation? So thank you very much.
Sure.
But if you could ask that question of someone
I'll look into that.
and see if we can find an answer to it. So that was my question. Thank you.
I have some.
Chris?
Okay,
Supervisor Biggs?
one of the things that hasn't been addressed at all is how much this is gonna cost the county, not just in money, but like employees, like how it all works out. So I'd assume that if this process is going forward to look at, that we would get a cost on how much, when you lose the state monies, or if you lose part of the state monies, and then how do you fold employees into a county system? Are there further costs involved? And then the other thing I think that probably needs to be talked about that Supervisor DeMott's sort of hit on here is the fact that you are losing 2 representatives that would be elected by the whole county to serve the citizens. So it's a loss of representation to citizens. So, that's a concern I have, but the cost is more a question. Like, how much would this cost? I don't know.
Well, if you'll recall, and when I talked with you on the phone, we talked about how today, or this meeting, is about really a neutral, just the facts. Dr. Holt provided us the facts and the history of it. Marty is providing us the legal structure. Our staff is going to provide at our next meeting some overviews in regards to would we still get, would we get no state money? Would we get some state money?
Good.
What are the percentages? But staff is not going to take a position as to whether this is a good idea or bad.
Right.
They're presenting just the facts in regards to that. Then the third meeting is to invite, I know that the Treasurers Association wants to come speak with us. I know that the Commissioner of Revenue wants to come speak with us. But we also said, and we would say that we would cover their expenses, but we want to reach out to Albemarle County, that appears to be the closest, to see if they would be willing to come. And maybe there's some supervisors that went through that process. to help provide us an overview. And frankly, because it affects, right now there's only 2 candidates running for the 2 other positions. I've not heard of a write-in candidate, but really it's going to have a huge impact on Sarah and for Steve coming into the next. And so as far as the chair, I'm not going to put it on to vote this year. And then we'll have to see who the chair is next year. But it's not my plan to vote on it this year because of the impact, at least to put it on. It's really, Sarah and Steve would have to run in 2 years, potentially again. And Todd would have to run again in 2 years. So in my mind, these first 2 meetings are much more facts. Staff providing us facts on a neutral basis. We receive a neutral basis. Then we're going to get a lot of opinions, I think, on how to move forward. And we may have members of the community coming forward. We may have other folks. And then hopefully we'll make an informed decision.
And I think that's good, Chris, that you're explaining it so the people that are watching this are going to understand the process that you sort of have laid out.
So, is there any other legal questions of Martin?
Can't think of anything else.
All right. Does anyone want to take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's make it a 10-minute break. We'll get started back at 9:15.
It takes me 5 minutes to get to the bathroom.
You can go ahead and do it. They have to be in their seats.
I hear somebody knocking.
The next item on our agenda is VDOT revenue sharing projects.
Oh,
Emily?
Okay, Craig, we'll be there in just a minute.
Revenue, okay, well, I've got to do the big thing.
Good evening.
Emily, could you hold up just a second?
Sure.
Emily's back. Hey
She took a
again.
nap and she's ready to go now. Oh, dear.
While we're waiting, I can let everybody know that all the watches and warnings have been dropped. So when we go out, it'll be a nice quiet evening.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Whatever has happened has froze my phone up.
Thank you.
I was going to say
Thank you, Emily.
that's
Appreciate it.
outside, by the way. I don't know what watches and warnings we have in here, but
We'll keep this, I'll keep the work session on revenue sharing pretty calm too.
thank you.
Good evening again. I have a couple of items related to revenue sharing to review with you tonight. I was here in September and talked to you about the policy changes, and we reviewed some of those because I think it's really important to get the board prepared for what's probably not going to be the most uplifting revenue sharing presentation that we've ever had. There's not only new policies related to some of the dollar amounts, but also in how the scoring takes place. I mentioned some of these things before, where we'll be submitting these online, which actually staff is very appreciative of. This is the first year we're looking at a 2-year cycle request. Revenue sharing is going to be every 2 years, smart scale every 2 years, and then they'll alternate. So we'll see how that goes. But the funds will still be made available in the same way in which they're done now. So if it's a FY19 request, you'll get it at the start of FY19. If it's FY20, you'll get it at the start of FY20. The application cycle is open. It does close November 1st, and so that's basically why I'm here to let you know some opportunities that we have. One of the things that we looked at was last year's applications, and we applied with 5 projects that we applied for last year. One was Western Perimeter, which is our pass-through project with Virginia Tech. One was additional funds on Price's Fork to get us through moving those utilities. And then we had 3 smaller projects. In FY18, there was only $100 million available statewide. And what the state decided to do was to only give funds to what they call Tier 1 projects. In Montgomery County, for us, that was our Price's Fork turn lane, because it was an existing project, and Western Perimeter Road, also because it was an existing project. In the 2-year cycle, they are planning to have $100 million available for each of those years. Historically, Montgomery County has requested about $500,000 annually in road projects, and we've used those for many secondary road improvements. And most of you will be familiar when I say things like Brush Creek and Yellow Sulphur and Blue Springs. These are road projects that we've worked with VDOT on. We've had issues related to safety. We've had issues related to lack of pavement, sight distance, all sorts of projects. And I just want to tell you all about to give you a little bit of perspective. My recommendations that we're getting ready to talk about are related to letting you know exactly which tiers these projects are going to fall into. I mentioned only Tier 1s were approved last year. Our 3 road projects that weren't approved last year would be more closely identified as Tier 3s. So we'll start with the Tier 1. Prices for turn lanes. We've talked about this being a county priority. It actually started before my time with the county. The board committed up to $1 million in funding on a $2 million project. And though the project has had some issues related to moving utilities and some of the improvements that we've seen in the right-of-way phase, all much needed. You'll be able to actually see to your left when you leave Brooksfield Road now, which is a pretty big deal if you're used to coming out of Brooksfield for any reason. You couldn't see towards Town of Blacksburg. We're going to be cutting that bank back, adding a nice new set of steps and a different fence for the property owner. But all these costs have added a little bit. So I had Dan Brew, who's our project manager, just go through the numbers one more time to make sure that we had enough funding on that, because we're a little bit anxious on revenue sharing in general. So I've shared these numbers with you before of what we had spent thus far, and that's not what we had spent. That represents revenue sharing, so we spent half of that. And then for FY19, Dan recommends that we do a request of $200,000. He feels like that, along with what the developer will be contributing, is enough to complete the project and still keeps the board under what you had committed yourself to at the very beginning of the project. And as I mentioned, that's a Tier 1 request. I see no reason, because we already have the data and it's not hard for me to just change the year on it in the system, to not put the same 3 applications in that we did for FY18. That included some drainage improvements out on Union Valley Road. They've got a terrible issue with washing out that is beyond the scope of what typical maintenance out of VDOT here locally does. So it really needs to be regraded and looked at, and I worked with our local VDOT folks on getting a project scope for that. And then the Pike Lane and Pine Hollow Road are 2 smaller projects that are more of a reconstruction and paving, is how they are best represented, smaller dollar amounts. Again, these are Tier 3. They didn't get funded last year. There's a really good chance they wouldn't get funded this year, but it's not a lot of extra effort on the staff's part. Doesn't exceed our $5 million cap. And since we never know how things will go in Richmond, I don't see any reason not to throw them in the queue. If all of these were a request, total revenue sharing, that was $600,000 with the county portion at $300,000. But I do want to bring forward another option for consideration. We looked at what a Tier 2 project is based on the guidance from the state. A Tier 2 project is either in your CIP, your capital improvement plan, or it meets a need in the statewide transportation plan, and that's known as VTrans. Interestingly enough, all the projects that we had to do for Smart Scale all had to meet a need in VTrans. So we took a look at the projects that we did for Smart Scale, and the Route 8 improvement project that I'm proposing was part of that. It was the number 2 project. The number 1 project we had identified as the intersection at Prices Fork and Pepper's Ferry. However, we have a lot more data on the Route 8 project, and it's a little more time sensitive. If you've been through there recently, you've seen the turn lanes that have now been completed with safety funds through VDOT at the intersection. This project would extend that sidewalk that they put in all the way up to the school, tie in with the Safe Routes to School project that we've been working on, would widen and add a curb on that side, It would also give the opportunity to continue that turn lane. So you have the schools improvements and you have the intersection improvements, and this is about 700 linear feet in the middle that's sort of just lingering around out there. We have a significant amount of data on this project because of the smart scale application that we put forward, and we basically took it and cut it in half because we would focus on the side with the sidewalk that would tie into the safety project, and we would get those improvements done, and then we would look at doing the other half. Because we're doing a 2-year cycle and because of the uncertainty related to the different tiers, I don't see any reason not to put in all of these projects. It would not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that we'd get them. It doesn't necessarily mean that we wouldn't. We feel fairly confident we will get the funds to finish out the prices for a project, and that is positive. It would be our first time looking at more of a primary road funding project with revenue sharing. We have focused on secondary roads up until this point, but unfortunately secondary roads are not going to meet those requirements to get the funding more than likely through revenue sharing as they have in the past. So this is part of my recommendation, and I did put a graphic in there, which is not best graphic, but this is what we worked on with VDOT. This is the intersection, and this is where you can see here where their project ended. This project is 725 linear feet of widening that goes all the way past the bank, and will tie in with the Safe Routes to School project that we are working on for the Auburn campus. And so this will bring you safely from the intersection where Dollar General, Post Office are located, all the way up to the schools. We have a design that will take you from that intersection up to some of the neighborhoods, including Cloverly. We don't have the funding for that now, but this just is sort of filling a missing gap. And of course, it also would handle all of the stormwater and all the other things that go along with the project, but they're more boring to talk about. So these are my recommendations, and in putting these together, I consulted with our local VDOT staff. I also spoke briefly with Craig and kind of let him know my way of thinking. Additionally, just consulted Scott, our new Director of Environmental Programs, had a long tenure with VDOT, so we walked through these projects as well. They're all strong projects, but this is the first year that I'll be coming to you and not talking about some of those smaller projects on secondaries like we have been before. Before I come to you next time with revenue sharing projects, we'll have more of a strategy that we can look at, make sure that we're geographically being diverse across the county and that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. That's a priority for staff as we move forward. I'll be glad to take any questions that anybody might have.
I'll start with Supervisor Shepherd.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Supervisor DeMotts.
I don't have any questions either. Thanks for being here, though.
Supervisor
Thanks for
Biggs.
having me. I think they look good, all three of those.
Supervisor, was there any other comment? Okay.
No, looks good.
Supervisor King.
Did they cut off all the shared money for back roads?
So the funding hasn't been cut off. All the projects that have been eligible before are still eligible. I could submit a significant amount or similar projects than what we've done before. But we know that they've only funded those Tier 1 projects this past year. The year before that, they funded all of Tier 1 and then only a percentage of what you applied for on your Tier 2s. That would have been FY17. For FY18, they only did your Tier 1s. So if we had those projects that you're describing, they would all be Tier 3s, and the state hasn't touched those in over 3 years.
So they cut them off.
Like they were already in the queue, yes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Perkins.
No, I don't have any.
Supervisor Creed. I do have a question, and Supervisor King and I met with some of the representatives from Floyd County. If we were to ask their support in regards to Route 8 improvements, because that's something that their board is interested in, they want to be able to connect to 81. Would that help us in maybe raising that to a Tier 1 project by having their board support it all?
It would not help us to raise it to a tier 1 because that's only existing projects.
Okay.
It does strengthen our time with our CTV rep to say that this is a project that has multi-jurisdictional support. The revenue sharing scoring is a little different than Smart Scale, and it's fairly, one, it's not as rigorous, but two, it's more pragmatic. It's sort of, once you check a certain amount of boxes and you're in the right tier, then they determine your funding. It is Route 8, and the widening of it is actually in the New River Valley SEDS document as a high importance of for economic development. And that's one of the things that we used when we submitted this as a Smart Scale. So I don't think that it is harmful to let them know that Floyd County is supportive of the project, but I don't think it would change the score per se.
Okay. I'll just go look. Do we have consensus to have the county administrator reach out to Floyd County to see if they would be supportive of that? Is there consensus?
That caused me to have a follow-up question.
Yes.
CTB representatives right now are Court Rosen and William Fralin, but William Fralin's term is about up.
William Fralin's term has expired. The governor is likely to recommend that Representative Rosen take Mr. Fralin's spot, but with the election for governor and whatnot, we're not real sure. We talked to Mr. Rosen about that week before last, and I'm not sure he's really sure, but right now we only have one, and that's Mr. Rosen.
And he likes our area.
He does. I want to make a comment about something. Yes, he does.
So will we have another one, or is it just going to be Court Rosen?
We will have another one at some point, but it may not be till after the first of the year.
Do we get any input? Probably not, right?
Governors like to appoint their own folks.
Didn't we learn about the bird machine earlier tonight?
The governors like to appoint their own folks, especially Virginia governors, because they only are elected for one term.
Okay.
On both sides, they like to do it. Just a little editorial comment.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions?
Whatever.
Okay, no other questions? Emily, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And in the next month, I will bring a resolution that needs to go along with the applications. I don't have to have that by November the 1st. I just have to have that before December 31st. So.
Okay, so we'll need to take action
between now and the end of the year.
Now and the end of the year. All right.
Thank you, Emily.
Next on our work session, vehicle procurement/replacement policy.
Mr. Chair, this is an item that Supervisor King and I have talked about a couple of times. Do you want to say anything?
No, you go ahead.
All right, I'll be glad to. The county's policy as it relates to vehicle procurement when we're replacing an existing county vehicle is not clear as to what happens to that existing county vehicle. In other words, if a department requests a new work truck, the policy's not clear as to, well, what happens to the truck that you're replacing once you buy the new truck. The reason that's come up is there's been several instances where new vehicles are purchased to replace existing vehicles in the fleet, but those existing vehicles continue to stay in the fleet. Supervisor, we've talked about that internally as staff for a while, and Supervisor King mentioned it a while back, and in the discussion we've had is it would make sense that the procurement policy be changed to say something to the effect that if a vehicle is procured to replace an existing vehicle in the fleet, then that existing vehicle must be turned in for surplus. Unless, and I'm going to add this and you tell me if you unless there's a compelling reason to keep it, and I'll give you the perfect example. With the new animal care and adoption center, we had a couple of old pickup trucks that were surplused because we replaced them with Ford Explorers. But one thing we didn't consider when we built the animal care and adoption center was they needed a pickup truck to be able to go get food from when PetSmart or Petco or somebody donates food. They needed a vehicle to be able to pick that stuff up. So we kept the best one of those trucks out of surplus and assigned it to the Animal Care and Adoption Center. That was a managerial decision. What I'm saying is sometimes, and I hate to say it this way, but I'll just say it, it's not a managerial decision. It's just we buy a new vehicle, but the existing vehicle continues to remain in the fleet. Vice Chair King suggested that perhaps we strengthen that to say that if a vehicle is procured to replace an existing vehicle, that existing vehicle must be turned in to be surplused unless there's a compelling reason that the county administrator feels it needs to be assigned somewhere else. Did I get that close to right?
Yeah, and what it is the insurance policy just keeps building and building.
And maintenance and fuel and yes.
I mean, just everything just keeps building.
Do they still have to have insurance and all that
Yes,
sort of
ma'am.
thing?
Yes, ma'am. So it does continue to add expense. You know, a number of times I think there's probably been fairly legitimate reasons to hang on to things, but what's been suggested through the procurement policy would really strengthen the requirement to surplus those vehicles, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing. As long as there's the ability, if there is an occasional exception to.
And as long as it's, I'm just gonna put this out there. Say Reiner needs a new truck. Well, if another department got a vehicle and we said, well, let us have that vehicle and use it, as long as we understand that truck doesn't been replaced once, it don't get replaced again. We're just using it. So we don't add to our fleet at the firehouse.
Can I ask this? And I know I'm on the Fire and Rescue Commission, but I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Let's say that one of the smaller departments, like Blacksburg and Christiansburg, they have more vehicles.
Right.
Let's say that for whatever reason, they've got a pumper truck that they're going to replace, and things have expanded out in Reiner.
Right.
And y'all really kind of need another pumper truck, but we don't have the money. Would this policy prevent me from Christiansburg transferring that truck to you, and then eventually you're going to replace that truck at some point in time? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you're always going to have at least two tankers.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is, we'll pass this truck to this department because we got new. With that department there, it'll get the same truck replaced, and they'll pass it to another. That's what I'm saying. Because every time you replace this one truck, you're adding more vehicles and not taking nothing off.
The only thing out of any concern I have is just I want to make sure that if a department needs something, that we don't interfere with.
Oh, this is not taking nothing away from nobody. They're still going to get their replacement vehicles.
Okay.
Only thing it is if you're not using them no more, you turn them back in.
Okay.
I think maybe the decision about if it could be repurposed could be a managerial decision or a county administrator level decision, because if Christiansburg's turning in a truck and Reiner needs it, Christiansburg would turn it into the county. Reiner would ask the county, hey, can we have that truck? Right. And we have a demonstrated need. I think it's a good way to increase accountability and be more fiscally responsible for the fleet as we manage it.
As long as Reiner understands that truck's done been replaced once. Don't come back to Craig and say, we need to replace this truck. Because he's going to say, no, it's done been replaced once.
So, I don't know.
That wouldn't be true until it used all the time it had on Earth.
So, if Reiner gets a truck that's been replaced through procurement, what you're saying is then Reiner can't turn around in 2 months say, we need to replace this and we'll turn it into surplus.
Right. Because if you do that, then county taxpayers is paying for that truck twice. They're replacing it. We're still adding, if you turn one in, then you're taking that one off the insurance and adding your new one to it. But if you keep this one, and add a new one, well, you done jumped 2 trucks on the insurance policy.
That sounds all right. It's a
I
little bit crooked there.
understand what you're saying, but if the other group needs it,
Right. They can have it. As long as Craig says they can have it.
they can have it.
Right.
But
They're not
what
gonna say
happens
have
then
another
when
one
that
after.
one maybe breaks down and needs to be replaced?
Then they could surplus it and get a replacement, but they'd have to return the one that broke down. They couldn't keep it as part of their fleet.
No, what I'm saying, that's true. I know about that, but that is paying for the same truck twice.
Well, it's already down. He's just, what we're trying to do is just beef up the meaning.
Beef up the what?
The meaning. It says in there you're supposed to turn it in. We want to change a word in there that says you will turn one in.
Strength, yeah.
In other words, you want to surplus it.
Right.
You want to
But-
make sure everybody understands that it has to be surplused, and then if it is reassigned, it has to be a managerial decision, not just a buddy-buddy agreement that they're going to do that.
Well, wouldn't that have to take place before it was surplused? If you were
Well, it
gonna,
would be.
if you were replacing it, you wouldn't surplus it. What it would come to, if somebody else needed it, they'd come to you and say, we need it, don't surplus it.
We've had situations in the past where a department has gotten a new vehicle, but they've not turned in their old vehicle. They've just kept it.
This is just kind of
And we
a,
need to strengthen the fact that if you get a new vehicle, you have to surplus your old vehicle. Now, then the decision is a managerial decision as to whether somebody else gets it or not.
Right.
basically they need to show up with keys to get keys.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it strengthens the fleet management policy.
Right.
I think it's
Well,
a
I
good
don't see
thing.
anything wrong with that. I guess I was just having trouble with the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's,
No, but I
We-
know,
we
I know
use
what
this-
you're saying, and I think it's right to surplus it. You know, but I think, again, managerial decision intervenes once a new vehicle is given. If you say you will surplus it, then you don't have a decision unless that's included
It'll say
in the,
we will.
in the,
well, the department will surplus it, but then it's up to the county as to whether they actually go through with selling it, the county IEB and administration, whether they go through with selling it or assign it to somebody else if there's a need.
Well, that would still
Well,
need to be something where whichever one was using it and quit using it,
well,
it still should come to the head of somebody.
Yes, sir.
And let them give it out to who it is. You can't just say, well, you, so-and-so, you go get that truck. You gotta prove that you need it, first.
Right.
And then you can, then that's when you can
Yeah, that's what they
claim
do.
to it.
That's what they do with Craig.
And what I think is confusing me is saying they have to surplus it.
Well, surplus it doesn't mean they sell it. They have to give it to the county as a surplus piece of property. Now, whether from their department, now what the county ultimately decides to do with it as far as reassignment or ultimately selling it.
well, I was just thinking that they're just saying they don't want it. Well, you do it. It's your job. I know, I guess it's just words and semantics. Just don't even get
Well,
into that.
and what I suggested to the vice chair earlier this evening is we don't have the language in front of you tonight as to how we'd reword it, but we
Yeah.
would like to strengthen the procurement policy
Sure.
to say that.
I see that.
And we'll come back with the wording on that for your review. and
Yeah,
approval.
okay. I understand what you're doing.
Is it any other, oh, yes, Supervisor Wicks.
Well, I was going to ask about the policy, but you answered that question. Okay, here's the question. When I think of vehicles, I immediately think of the sheriff's department because of their need for vehicles that they can use for public safety. So, all right, so if a surplus vehicle comes back from the sheriff's department and it's sold, or any department, let's say, and it's sold, then does that money go back into the general fund for all vehicles, or would that money go back into the general fund for that department's vehicle?
Goes back into the general fund for the county, because it goes into the general fund for the county as revenue.
Okay, so like if there was some kind of need in any department, like, Todd mentioned the fire departments, or I mentioned the sheriff's department, rescue or whatever, they would come to you.
For an
and then
appropriation, and I would recommend an appropriation
right.
to y'all.
Or if they wanted to keep something, they'd have to go through you.
Yes, ma'am.
And you would have that conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Because the root issue there is if the vehicle's still good enough to keep in a department for a use, then why is it requested to be replaced?
Right, unless it's like a downgrade of a use.
Right.
Like the pickup truck.
Right.
And I have a question about that. When you have a downgrade of a use of a vehicle, do you have to pay the same insurance payments as a regular vehicle?
You just pay insurance based on the worth of the vehicle. It's not based on...
Okay, so if you were like the downgrading of the pickup truck maybe, or something like that, then it...
Well, and I can't speak to specifics in terms of, if, for example, if it's no longer used as a law enforcement vehicle, but it's just used as a work truck.
Yeah.
There may be some differential
Yeah,
in premium on that, but generally it's based on the value of the vehicle.
Okay, thanks.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but now that we've been on the board a while, those fire trucks cost $600,000. That insurance premium is much higher than on a $60,000 vehicle.
Got it.
Yeah. So is there consensus that the staff will prepare?
It's all right with me.
All right. All right. Is there a motion to come out of work session?
Motion. Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item on our agenda is old business, specifically rural addition priority list, to add Big Vein Road back to the rural addition priority list.
I'd like to make a motion to add it back to the list at number 1.
Is there a second to that?
Was it always at number 1?
It has not been on the list at this point.
It was removed from the list completely.
There's a motion. I do not hear a second.
For to put Big Vein back?
As the number 1 priority on the list.
Okay, I can second it, and can Daryl talk about it? Because he sent us that email.
Yes, absolutely. So you seconded it. There's a discussion.
Well, you got the email that
Yeah.
and I got it from, what's his name, Bob, today. And one of his big points, and I kind of see it, is over the last 10 or 15 years that Big Vein Road, it only had like a couple houses on it to begin with.
Yeah.
And then his point is the county started issuing building permits for houses. Well, the road at one point comes down into a V, and it's about as wide as that desk. So if you meet a vehicle on the it's just a driveway, and it's gotten to be a small housing development is what it's amounted to. And I can't tell you how many houses in it, but that's his main point.
Yeah.
I understand all the reasons why not, but I do understand their reason for wanting it back up at number 1. I mean, they've been waiting too.
Is there any other discussion?
What is on number 1 at this point?
They provided us a list.
I know.
At the last meeting.
And I
but
Cornbread.
Is it
Cornbread Road?
Yeah, Cornbread Road.
Okay. And where is that?
We've
At
been on it
Cornstalk.
before.
Where?
Is it cornbread or cornstalk?
Cornbread.
Cornbread, and
Oh.
cornstalk's on there too, but cornbread isn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
And where is it? I'm sorry. Where is it?
Cornbread is in the Bethel area.
Well, one thing that sort of makes this a little bit hard is that we haven't done our road viewers tour in a long time, so we can actually compare, in our minds and by seeing it, which one needs what. So that's what I'm struggling with. That's why I asked Daryl what he thought, because I'm really struggling with how to do this.
Is there other discussion?
Well, you know, and I appreciate Darrell bringing that up because, you know, that's what he's supposed to do. But the way it's usually done, if I'm correct, is if you're off the list, then they move you back to the bottom if you come back on. Is that right?
I don't,
know if you ever had one come back on.
it's not happened in the time that I've been here. I'm looking at the more tenured people.
That would be Marty.
That would be Marty, okay.
But, I mean, if it is voted to move back to the top of the list, what's to stop these other people from taking theirs off and coming back?
Nothing.
It's only
I
your
don't-
attitude and your values.
Well, Supervisor Creed?
I don't disagree with somebody putting something like that out there for us to know how bad they need it. But at the same time, there may be other folks out there. I think we need to include everybody that has a chance and let the winner be the one that does that the most. Yeah, I certainly don't mind anybody because I've had a bunch of them that in my tally that
Well,
you know,
I don't know what to do.
has never had enough yet.
in my opinion, that's a good program, that rural addition program that VDOT does, but it falls way short of the money that's needed to do the projects to begin with, and they have to wait so long. It's such a frustration for the people that, you know, need that done. And I don't know what the other roads look like. I know what Big Main looks like. It needs gravel right now, to be honest with you, I'm sure. It's just,
I think
it's
we
an
need
old
to
wagon
go
road. It's about what it
on the
looks like.
ride.
Well,
Do we have to do it tonight?
well, I know that Darrell wanted it to be on the agenda, and I put it on the agenda. I cannot support it. I won't vote for it to be number one. I'll vote for it to get back on the list.
How do we do that?
There would have to be a vote down. If I'm in the majority, I don't know where everybody's vote is.
I can't.
But I can't see them coming off the list and then trying to explain to the people who are been on the list the whole time, have been on it for 20 years, or it may have been even longer. And how do I explain to those citizens, well, they came off the list for 9 years, they were off, it didn't work out, and then suddenly we would put them back to the front. I would have to have a valid reason in my mind. Now, I'm happy to put them back on the list as far as my vote, but tonight, if I vote, I'll put them back on the list, but they're at the bottom and they're going to have to work their way back up. Now, I'm also willing to say, all right, let's reevaluate all 9 of them. But if we do that, we're going to have some folks who are going to be mad because they may go from 2 to 6.
All right.
And because we're going to be evaluating each one based on, in my mind, population, traffic, danger.
Emergency services.
Yes,
all that.
emergency services, all
I'd be
those.
interested to also evaluate how we're funding the rural additions to begin with.
Well, that's a state issue, and the short answer is very little.
I mean, could we do more?
We don't. The state
We've
does.
always been
This is-
zero for
I'm
the
sorry.
last 5, 6
We
years.
don't do the matching funds, but
Okay.
we've got matching funds that the state is not matching on other projects.
Well,
But they're only keeping like, what did he say, 10,000, 5,000 a
They
year or
only keep
something?
a small amount of money, and then going
Maybe not
back
even
to
that much.
revenue sharing, when Emily was talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3s, these would be low tier 3 projects. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's just not enough VDOT money to cover all these things.
Could I ask
I
Daryl?
totally understand. I mean,
Daryl,
I
what would you
understand
think
everybody's point.
about putting it back on the list and not putting it as
Oh,
number
absolutely.
1? Well, can we withdraw our motions and do a new one?
There could either be it's seen as a friendly amendment. I'm trying to follow Robert's.
Yeah, what can we
Or
do?
either, if there's not an agreement for a friendly amendment, then there would have to be a vote. If it doesn't pass, then somebody could make a second motion to put it back on the list. If it does,
Daryl.
Daryl's.
And then I could second it.
And so, I'm looking to my attorney and making sure I'm following Robert's Rules of Order correctly. So, but there still could be another motion after the first one, which is put it number 1, and that would be just to put it back on the list at the bottom, I guess, or wherever somebody. One, because we would have voted on it. So there's a motion and a second, and I'm looking, do you want to make a friendly amendment, or do you want to vote on it as number one?
I'll make a friendly amendment. I want to say one more thing, though.
Okay.
After we vote on this, can at some point we go back and look at each one of those and maybe do something a little different in the future?
I don't have a problem with looking at priorities.
I mean, and maybe they all look the same. I don't know.
It'd be good to do a road
He
viewers
means like
tour.
go on a trip like we used to in the old days.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so, well, I think we did one about 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So,
I've never been on one.
Yeah, she's never been on. You're not neither.
so that would be.
I'll make a friendly amendment to add it back to the list.
And I'll second Daryl's friendly amendment.
Okay. There's an amendment to just simply place it back on the list without number one priority. I assume it's at the bottom at this point in time, with an understanding that this board is going to do a road trip and not the fun necessarily kind of road trip, and then revisit this and look at the priorities of each one, taking various factors into consideration.
Well, yeah. Can we go so far as to say we'll get an outside source, Emily, to look at them all and say, maybe this is the way they should be ranked? I don't know.
So does Emily get to go on a road trip?
Yes. At some point in time, because and this is just my perspective from being, I don't like staff to have to make them. That's why we got elected.
I understand that.
And so
I understand that.
Now
We can certainly bring you the information on each road.
Yeah.
and all the issues.
okay. They could say, okay, there's 50 people that live on this road, and there's been 9 accidents in the last year, and then allow us to take the information in and make the decision.
Well, last year when they did that upgrade and they did the sight distance layback where you could see, that really helped them a lot. So they've actually got something out of this already. But
so there's an amendment. Is there any other discussion?
Just one point of consideration. If we go on the road trip post November the 7th, which is
road viewers tour.
The road viewers tour. I apologize for calling it a road trip. If we go on the road viewers tour post election, can we bring along I guess newly elected if they have it time in their schedule?
I think that would be
We have several 15-passenger vans,
and Emily's coming.
And being a former school bus
Maybe
driver,
Jennifer
I
can
can drive the
come.
van and talk. And
Yeah, you do
This
a
is
good
going to be
job of
great.
that.
All right.
I made some wicked 3-point turns last time.
So there's a motion and a second, and that's a good idea. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on the amended motion?
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item is new business and resolution authorizing the First Amendment to the Real Estate Purchase and Option Agreement dated May 11th, 2016 by and between the County of Montgomery, Virginia and Midtown Redevelopment, LLC. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
I'm going to abstain from discussion and voting on this item because I abstained from discussion and voting on it when it was originally voted on for the contract. So I'm not going to vote again.
Any other discussion? I have some questions of Marty, if that's all right. Did anybody else have any? Marty, I want to try to put this in layman's terms. All right, they have an option that they have to exercise by November the 10th. With this amendment, do they still have to exercise that option?
Correct. That doesn't change.
And this, they would still have to close within 30 days, so by December the 10th. Is that correct?
Right, if they exercise the option. If they don't exercise the option, then the contract's null and void and goes to the front acreage and there's no longer.
Okay.
Under this amendment, they have still up till the 10th to exercise it, and if they do, they have to close in 30 days from that date, so no later than December 9th, obviously, it can carry on the 10th. And then what this amendment does is it gives them the opportunity to further purchase
right, if they decide to sell it to Chris Tuck 6 months from now, do
think
we
that
get
would be
our
a
money at
conflict
that
of
point in time? That would be a conflict. I'm just using myself. If they decide to sell it.
Is there something you need to tell us?
No, I'll use Carol as the example. So if they decide to sell it to Carol, they have to then pay the 2.5 then.
Correct, yeah. The loan would be in the deed and the note saying that the property is sold within that year when the purchase price will be.
All right, and so they have to pay 3% interest on that money, the 2.5 million. And this is more to staff instead of, in regards, right now, the treasurer's investing our money.
That's correct.
What are we getting on the first, I know that it's broken up in tiers and I want to make sure I get it right. When do we start getting interest on our money?
We don't receive interest on the funds that are held by the bank until we exceed $8.5 million.
So we get no interest on the first 8.5 million.
It's what's called compensating balances with the agreement with the bank, so that's correct. No interest on the first 8.5 million.
Now, after 8.5 million, we get 1.5%. So
on the amount above 8.5 million.
Right, and so that means that we're basically doubling our money by going with 3% interest. Am I looking at that? And plus doubling our money because on the first 8 million, we don't get any interest.
That's a fair statement.
All right, and so, and I'm roughly doing my math, and I did it earlier today, but it's been a long day. 3% interest on $2.5 million is
$75,000 a year.
$75,000 a year, okay. So otherwise we would get $37,000, so this is basically an additional $37,000 potentially for the schools. Okay. Does that spark other questions?
I don't think so.
All right, there's a motion and a second, and there's no other discussion. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Abstain.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 abstain.
Next, subject B, New River Valley Emergency Communication Regional Authority Amendment to Chapter 638, Virginia Acts of Assembly.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Subject C, Economic Development Capital Projects, specifically the Cox property and the expansion of the Falling Branch Commerce Park.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yay.
Yeah.
April clapping. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Creed?
Aye.
Ms. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Tuck?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item is County Attorney's Report. County Administrator's Report.
3 items this evening, Mr. Chair. I'll be attending a couple of meetings in Roanoke again over the next week. Tomorrow is the groundbreaking for the expansion of the VT Korean Medical School in Roanoke. And Governor McAuliffe will be there. Also President Sands from Virginia Tech. And they've asked for representation from Montgomery County, so I look forward to attending that. Also, I was asked by our CTB member if I would have any interest in riding the inaugural Amtrak trip from Lynchburg to Roanoke next Monday, and I said that'd be fun. So I have to be in Roanoke next Monday at 7 o'clock in the morning to get on a bus to go to Lynchburg to get on a train to ride back to Roanoke. But that'll still be cool. So I'm going to do that next Monday. And also next Monday, just wanted to remind everyone of the joint Board of Supervisors school board meeting. That'll be next Monday night. And is it here?
At Christiansburg High School in the library.
Okay, that's.
Okay.
I knew the culinary students were providing the meal, but I wasn't sure if we were here or there, but we're there. So that's all I have.
Supervisor Perkins.
I have no report.
Supervisor Biggs.
last Wednesday, Supervisor Perkins and I were able to attend the reception at the Christiansburg Library for our new executive director, Mr. Khan, and it was very well attended, and he will be coming around to present at a future board meeting. And I did get a phone call today from a citizen that was concerned about, did Montgomery County have a plan for the water system out where the pipeline was going to be put in? Because if the water goes bad, who is going to be paying for all of that? And does it have anything to do with the expansion that, like of the water treatment plant that we talked about tonight, which actually that doesn't, but I think more to her point was what is going to happen if the water goes bad? I mean, how will they be serviced as Montgomery County citizens? So I know we don't have a plan for that. I know we don't have money for that, but I think that probably we need to think about, I'm not sure about where all this is with the pipeline, with bonding, or what can actually be done. I don't know how much it would cost if you had to provide water for citizens, but I just thought I would bring forward her voicemail and let you know that she had called. And I think that is all. I have I guess it will be after we meet again. I will be going to Richmond on Halloween, which I think is actually funny, to the last Governor McAuliffe's last local government's advisory board meeting. So I don't know if he'll be able to tell us anything about his proposed budget, but we will be advocating for localities and for education, and maybe we can find out other information. I'll bring it back, and that's all.
Supervisor DeMonts.
4 things, kind of quick. This one, I guess, is for you, Craig. I was wondering if you could follow up on an update for recycling in county-owned government facilities, like buildings, especially in light of Christiansburg Town Council's recent decision to talk about the possibility of adding curbside recycling service to Christiansburg, which I am super excited about for Christiansburg residents. I know curbside isn't an option for county residents, but I think we could give some consideration to how we can do better in our facilities.
Yes.
So I'm asking for an update on any follow-up information from staff on that.
We need to get the Assistant General Services Manager here to report on that, yes.
And so in the same vein, I just needle you with this at every opportunity. I'm still really hoping for a dedicated sustainability manager position to be created. I have not forgotten, and I'll continue to bother you about it. And then I wanted to follow up. We had discussed at one point, you and I, Craig, not the whole board, about implementing an anti-idling policy with exceptions for emergency response vehicles, school buses, vehicles that are temperature dependent. So I wanted to follow up and see if we had decided to implement an anti-idling policy.
We've not decided to implement it yet, but we do have a draft that we need to review and move forward with.
Okay.
So yes.
So put it on your list. Sorry. And then on a more fun, happy note, I want to encourage county residents to come to the Government Center on Halloween and do trick-or-treating around the various departments in this building. Our staff will dress up in costumes. It's a lot of fun. Last year I got to dress up. Maybe somebody will invite me to dress up as part of their department this year, hint, hint. And that is from? It is from 3 to 4:30, or I'm looking. Is it 3 to
4:30? Or is that? I think
it was a lot of fun for the kids because it was early enough where they could still do trick-or-treating like out in the neighborhood, but there were a lot of grown-ups dressed up and acting silly, which I know has to be incredibly amusing for children. So,
and I was going to amend that one thing, because you did invite all county citizens. We only give candy to the children.
Well, I know. There you go.
We'd run out of candy real quick.
So bring your ID.
I saw Carol crunching numbers immediately.
I started thinking, we don't have that much candy.
But I do encourage citizens to bring their children to collect candy then. And that's all I have.
Supervisor Shepherd.
Just one thing for April. School buses No, I don't think we actually have a policy, but we're not supposed to idle over 2 minutes at any given time.
Love it. I love it. That's
That's all I
fantastic.
have.
Supervisor Creed.
Another thing.
Supervisor King.
That idling, is that for county vehicles?
Just sitting in like
This
a
could be
parking lot
yours too,
idling
Todd.
and-
You know, it's more strange if you cut diesel off as bad on them.
I've always heard that, and the diesel mechanics at the school garage say no.
Yeah.
What? Idling, what?
That's all.
I have a couple of things. One, and this is really a question for Gary. We're doing the event coming up on Sunday, groundbreaking down the ball fields. I happen to watch the weather, and they're saying that it may have a massive temperature drop, and it may snow, and
Oh, no.
rain.
And
Gary, I kind of want to put this is in your district. This is some ball fields that we're going to break ground on. We can still do it and go forward with it that day. If you want to do a rain date, that's great. If you said, hey, look, maybe we do it down at the center, down at Walden Center, that's a good idea. I'm kind of looking to you for guidance on what you would like to do. And it is coming up Sunday, so and like I said, I know weather's liable to change, but
I think we need to take a look at the weather because, it may be terrible, it may be something that's go to.
All right.
Or it may have all messed up the field so much that you can't walk on it.
And we know how accurate the weather forecast is, but the latest one that we use is cold with rain and a thunderstorm during the day, 47, temperature dropping through the afternoon, and that night 26 and very cold.
With that in mind,
Hope it's short.
well, we kind of have some activities planned. We were doing, not just the groundbreaking, but we were going to have some things there.
Some fun things,
and some fun things, kind of similar to what we have with Miss Turk. It's not an ice cream truck. But I guess my question to you is, would you rather do a ceremony at there in Charlottesville and at the library, or would you rather brave the elements, or would you rather have put it off and for another week or 2 weeks? We'd have to look at everybody's calendars. What would you like?
I think you need to go ahead and go forward with it if you're going to go at all, and in doing so, have the other set aside. You may meet down there, and if it's fine, go ahead and do it. If not, go back up to Walter's library. Not necessarily the library, or they have that
community room.
All right, I'm going to make a judgment call with the staff's help of, say, on Wednesday, here in just a couple of days, because we got to let the general public know. And I'm looking at Jennifer, and she looks anxious. Jennifer, can I ask, is there a cutoff date for like the tent and things like that? So we.
I can find out. I don't know.
All right, but if you. All right, and then check with the community center. Do y'all authorize me to be able to make that call, and we'll do it Wednesday? And if something comes up and Jennifer says, well, we've got to know by tomorrow on the 10th, we'll make a judgment call on the 10th, and then we'll try to notify the public and make sure everybody gets an email saying what we're doing. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
And then I want to make y'all aware, normally we have our monthly liaison meetings with the town and the school boards and the like. Well, we have a joint school board meeting coming up after that. Both the town's representatives said that they could not be there at the liaison meeting, so it would really be just us, tech, and the school board at the meetings. And so I talked with Craig and Todd, and so we made the judgment call at that point in time. Let's just put it off until the November meeting. And would y'all be aware of that? Otherwise, there's nothing.
And we're meeting with the school board for our monthly liaison meeting on Thursday, so we'll still see them this week anyway.
Yes.
So the November meeting would be after the election, so the playing field will change a little bit by that time too.
Potentially, yes.
What time is that meeting on the 30th?
Is it 6 o'clock at Christiansburg?
We usually do dinner at 6:30, and the meeting starts at 7.
I think, and Penny Franklin needed to be later, and so he maybe
that's why we moved to 6:30 and 7, because we did start at 6.
Right.
And I know.
I'll confirm and send out an email.
Okay. Is there anything else? This meeting is adjourned. Whoa.
We got 45 minutes. Just sit here till 11.
This meeting's adjourned.
Sit here for yourself.